not live though. Just come on, ZBrush. Oh shit! I also have to, of course, push it out as well.
Should I make a story?
Yeah, please do.
Do you want to send me the phone?
Oh yes. I'll just send her Messenger since I'm already on Messenger. Okay, let's also have this just as ready on buffer as well with the link once we go live. Because then we can push it up.
Should I set up the buffer? What's going on?
Yeah, please do. Just being something like, we're streaming, join us here. And then push it out like now. Like, not now, but like share it immediately. Okay, great.
Where's the link?
It's in your Messenger. Well, it's actually, yeah, it's this link here. But we will just go live and then we will just share it once we are actually live.
So that link will work the moment we're live, right?
Well, actually, let's double check it. I'll send you a new link. That's a really good point.
I'll make a story the moment it's live.
Yeah, great.
Did you send me the thumb?
Yes, it's a Messenger. So you can just go to actually your Messenger.
It should be on yours as well, you know.
Yeah, I just didn't think that you were actually on my computer. So that's the link. Yeah, okay, it's good. It was actually the wrong link. Okay, so we should actually be good to go.
Okay, let me prepare. You like do this, but then like, where did that go now? Downloads?
Yeah. Fuck. Let's go here. Super downloads. What? You don't smell? And then if you post your Discord as well.
Okay, well, once we're live.
All right, I will change this to live now.
Okay. Send me a link once you do.
Okay. All right, we are now live.
Can I get a link?
Yes. Wait, I just have to go ahead and change this to. Okay, I think I've already sent you a link.
Where?
Oh, shit, it's annoying. I'll just stop the stream real quick here. Stop. All right. So if you just go there and just.
Is that good?
But just check it in incognito mode first. Just double check.
It looks like it's live.
All right, cool. We are live. We're just going to be pushing this out. So anyone watching now, we are just about to push this live to everyone. This is going to be a stream where we are just doing some nice little sculpting in ZBrush, and we'll just be taking your questions. Just give us a little bit of time for the setup, and we'll be right with you. In the meantime, I'm just going to be doodling around in ZBrush. Okay, and then we just go to this one. And then you can see, then people can say, then we can go. And then if we share this on Discord as well.
Okay, 1 second.
Okay.
Where is Discord here?
Discord is there.
Where did you?
We are live. All right, cool. All right.
Okay.
All right, cool. So in this stream, we are going to be taking a general Q&A. We're going to be taking your questions, and at the same time, we will be sculpting. We're joined here by the lovely Elpida, and she will also be helping us moderate and doing some general, taking your questions and basically relaying a lot of that to me while I am sculpting.
Yes, that's me.
So let's just wait a little bit until seeing if people are joining here or not. And hello, Justine.
Hey, Justine.
So the general approach is I'm taking when it comes to this is first I'm starting off finding some reference. This is just some very, very quick reference. We have some reference from just from Hades, which is the best thing ever. Then we have some general concept art which other people have made. Then we have some sculptural reference from like an art style and the feel. And then we have anatomical reference. Then we have some more sculptural reference. The good thing about using actual sculpture instead of real bulls is that they're standing still, and people have also refined a lot of the anatomy before us, so that we don't have to stylize it ourselves. Then I have some reference of just a simple skull, which might be handy, and then some human anatomy reference as well. And I also have right behind me, I have an anatomical man as well, which can also help me later on as well. Like that's just on my actual desk right behind it. All right, Justine saying the sound is great. That's cool. We have a microphone which is right in front of my face, so that's cool. So. Also just a reminder, we have a Black Friday sale right now, which just went live a few hours ago, where everything on FlippedNormals is currently 50% off, which includes all our training like Introduction to Sculpting, Intro to ZBrush, all our bundles and all that. So let's get started. I'm going to be working just from a simple sphere, and then I'll just take it from there. This is not a sculpt where I have too many plans. It's going to be very explorationary, where we are just trying out a few different things and seeing where it lands us. It's going to be a lot more fun than just purely reference based. So I'm just starting off with the head. And for the head, I'm kind of using the reference I have here just of the bull. And it will be very rough, and it will just be nice and simple. I'm just trying to get the primary shapes in for now. And nothing fancy, no eyes, just a small indication of where the eyes are. One thing to be aware of when it comes to bulls specifically is that their eyes are very far apart, and they are very much to the side as well. This is so they can see the predators. If the eyes are straight forward, that means you are a predator, but since they're to the side, that means that they can see everything, but they can't really see stuff like shadows, which is a problem. So I'm just taking this very nice and easy. I'm using a custom interface now. You can actually find this on FlippedNormals. That's just completely free. If you just search for something like custom ZBrush interface, you should be able to find that. That just helps me a lot. Then we turn Dynamesh. And what I tend to do a lot of times is I just mask off an area, I control click, and then we are just dragging this out like so. They're saying they can't see the bottom. Okay, it shouldn't really be a problem if you can't see the bottom, because we are not going to be working a lot with the bottom anyway of the interface. I'll just try to keep this guy on the top.
Oh yeah, that's because there's the banner
Yeah,
there.
yeah, there's nothing that interesting there. The only thing I have on the bottom is right here. There's a little Dynamesh button, but you can also just find that under Geometry, Dynamesh, and Dynamesh right here. Also, if you guys have questions, that's also why we're here. We are also here to answer your general questions. So anything you have in your mind, anything from our industry or any general questions you have, more than happy to answer. Then Elpida will just be reading them out to me, and I'll just be trying to answer them as best I can.
That's me.
That's you.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to do now is I'm just trying to block in the main body. A lot of times you'll be starting with a base mesh with this, but for now I'm just having fun and just exploring. The head is definitely going to be a bull, like probably all of this is going to be 100% bull. And then I'm thinking the rest will be human. I think I'll keep everything human, like same with like this guy as well from Hades, where the bull is really the head and maybe the overall shape language, but where the majority is really human.
Okay. Question: what are some good schools for 3D modeling?
So there aren't really schools for 3D modeling per se, apart from maybe some shorter courses here and there, like CGMA. But nobody's going to give you a bachelor in 3D modeling like that. So it's more worth looking into some decent schools, and that becomes a bigger questions. If you want to specifically become good at 3D modeling, then honestly, I know I'm biased here because I'm running a company selling training, but then I would highly recommend just getting tutorials online. One of the reasons is because schools just aren't that good at teaching very specialist skill sets. They're very good at general skill sets, but not necessarily making you an amazing modeler. So I'm just dragging stuff out now. Another way of doing this, which is I actually prefer, but it's kind of fun to just be dirty like this as well, is to start with different primitives. Like you're starting with a cube and you're just moving it out and then merging it together later on and keeping them separate. Then it's easier to make a good, nice, clean shape for it.
So we have a general question by Carloids. What are some suggestions you have for freelancers are starting out? Like what?
Oh, that's an interesting one. One of the main things you have to get as a freelancer is, well, first, there are two things. You have to first be good at what you're doing. You have to be able to prove to your clients that you can actually do the job. But then second off, you need to have a network as well. As a freelancer, the majority of your jobs are most likely going to come from your network. And you have to, if you have to chase every single job, that's going to be really hard and it's going to eat up all your time. So make sure that you network a lot. And I don't mean obviously in these COVID days you're not going to go to like SIGGRAPH or something like that. But you should try to be active on different forums, and you should try to, or social media. You should try to have an active art station, just so you know that your portfolio is up to date. And generally interacting with a lot of people, that will help you so much as a freelancer.
How would you network now?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Like, how do you network now? One of them is like online is still a good way of networking. Like, just because it's online doesn't mean that it's not real networking.
Would you like on social media and so on?
Yeah. And share your work. Honestly, one of the best ways of networking is by sharing your knowledge. Is by instead of trying to make people come to you by. Where you come to people by trying to persuade them that your work is good. Sharing your knowledge means people come to you, and that means that you just have a much, much bigger chance.
Another question by Amanda. She says, I feel super intimidated when I see artists who are much further ahead of me in skill, even if it's irrational. Any advice?
Oh, that's a good one. The problem with that is that doesn't ever go away. I have that always where I'm always intimidated. I see people like Nakpil on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm like, man, I wish I was as good as that. It's more figure it out if there is something productive you can do to like figure out if you're feeling insecure about your skills because your skills are actually lacking, or figure out if it's because of imposter syndrome where you might actually be great. If it's because if you are actually solid and you got your job, and like if that's your goal, then great, then you can work on that. But if the problem is that you actually aren't there yet, then you can attack your weaknesses and move forward with that. It's a tricky one. Artist insecurity is just eternally a tricky question because artists are just very sensitive. I have this all the time. I know most of my artist friends, they're really insecure about their own work.
Yeah. Do you have any websites to suggest for finding references, reference images, things like that?
It kind of depends on what kind of reference you're looking for. If you are, I kind of tend to go based on what I'm looking for. Honestly, Google is a good one, but where the trick to being on Google is not just to search old man if you want old man reference. It is to be specific in your searches and go from there. For instance, if I'm looking for scans or like human reference, I might go to like something like 3D Scan Store, where they have really good references of like actual humans without any issues in terms of like the photos. They're just scans. There is no light or shadow obscuring things. So scan stores can be really useful. Pinterest is one of those love-hate things I have. I really dislike Pinterest in some ways, and I really like it in some ways. If you have a user and you're logged in, it can be fantastic.
Another question by Lowry. Maybe I butchered that, I'm sorry. How hard is it to find a job as a 3D sculptor in the industry? How
hard is it to find a job as a 3D sculptor? That is a very general question. It's a good question, but it's so general that it's hard to answer it. If you're good, it's not that tricky. But if you're not good, it's impossible. Like it's not like being a 3D sculptor is not like a skill you can be like 50% at, and therefore you get 50% of the jobs. You just have to be of a certain level in order to get a job as a 3D sculptor. So it is kind of like a winner takes all kind of situation. So if you're good, no problems. If there is a lot to be desired in your skills, then unfortunately it is very hard. But that's where focusing on core fundamentals, like we cover this a lot in Intro to Sculpting as well, where just focusing on proper deep skills instead of all the fancy features and buttons will really help. If you can do a realistic figure, mostly from imagination with some reference pictures without using a fancy base mesh, you're in a really good spot. If you can't do that, then it's going to be a lot harder for you. It's really important that you're comfortable with the human figure. If the more comfortable you are with the human figure, actually sculpting it, the easier it is going to be to get a job as a sculptor.
Okay. Hector is asking, hey Henning, at what point in the process do you choose to pose your model, if it's a 3D concept or for 3D printing?
I pose my models at the very end. I tend to always work in T-pose, and then I post at the very, very end. But that's if it's for something really like expressive, then I post it very early on, just because then it's more fun and I get to express myself more, I guess. But if it's for like anything where time is of the essence, I post it at the end, because it's so much quicker to sculpt something with symmetry than it is to sculpt both sides.
Juan is asking, if you've reached the point where you're good at modeling, do you think that you should learn to texture as well? Or do you think you can get a job without being that good in texture? Yeah,
you can definitely get a job by not being a texture artist. That was what Morten was doing. His texturing skills are decent, but he's not a texture artist. And he was fine being able to get jobs there. But it really helps you to be a texture artist. Let's say you only want to be a modeler. It still really helps you to know texturing, because your work will always go to texture artist. So if you understand how to texture, you understand how to UV map something in a far, far more efficient manner. So I highly recommend that you have some knowledge of the departments before and after you. Before you in modeling, not a whole lot. You have concepting, and that's a bit different, but particularly rigging and texturing. You will greatly improve your work if you know how to do those things. You'll just work in a far better way, and you'll understand the issues they're having. If you don't understand texturing and you're trying to UV map something, you're just kind of trying things out. You're just kind of winging it every single time, and that's very hard.
Shabham, I think. Sorry again for the name. How to stick to one project and force to finish it?
I think what helps is I'm actually going through a book which is kind of on this. It's called Deep Work, and it's focusing on one thing at a time. If you sit down, do the project. Don't be on Reddit and social media at all times and doing it, and then just working a little bit on the project. It's sit down and do the project. Remove your phone. Don't do anything else. Just focus on it for a few hours. Be productive, and just keep doing this for some time. What I also tend to do is I tend to split my project into smaller chunks as well, instead of trying to think about the whole project where you have to do every single thing. It really helps to segment it into smaller areas, where today I'm just focusing on the mouth of the character. Tomorrow I'm focusing on the teeth of the character. Because one of the reasons I think a lot of people, including myself, move on to new projects is because it becomes very intimidating. You reach a point where you're a bit scared of continuing because there is so much work. But if you can segment it into smaller pieces, it becomes a lot easier for me to finish projects. Just break every big problem into smaller problems. That's how I deal with most things.
A question, I'm not sure about if you know about this one, but it says, by Stormy, just starting to learn ZBrush for games environment work. What are the top 5 fundamental tools I should care about, and what aspects of ZBrush should I totally ignore?
Right, so we have a free YouTube video on this. You can probably just search ZBrush tutorial on YouTube, and I think it's going to be pretty high up there. That one will kind of go through most of the things you need to know. If you want to have more in depth, we have an Introduction to ZBrush series as well, which covers a lot more things. But in essence, it's kind of what I'm doing now with the sculpt I'm doing right now, which is you need to understand. I'm not going to give a top 5 list. I'm going to give you a bucket of important things where you need to understand the general interface and workflow. Like, you shouldn't just memorize some steps. You should understand some of the fundamentals of how it works. For instance, what is a tool? How do you save? What is the difference between a tool and a project? But you should understand how to use a few brushes, like the clay buildup brush, the move brush, the standard brush. Specifically for environments, you're going to have some custom brushes as well, which is just going to make your life a lot easier, like the orb brushes, just orb as in, well, an orb. And there's going to be a few specific things. What you shouldn't worry about is all of this crap here. Array mesh, nano mesh, fiber mesh, geometry HD. Most of these menus you're going to be using once in a while. For the majority of all the work you've been doing, you're going to be probably dealing with Dynamesh, a few brushes. You're going to be dealing with the subtool menu and this menu here, like saving, importing, and exporting. You also should get familiar with the zero measure buttons. Zero measure is found in geometry. Zero measure and zero measure right here. This is where you can very quickly auto retopologize your models. The good thing about that, particularly for environments, is that you don't necessarily need that fancy topology. So you can start off with Dynamesh, use some fancy brushes on that, and then you can zero mesh it and have good topology. Another useful tool for environments, not so much for characters actually, but for environments, would be the noise feature, which is under tool, and it's under one of these ones. It's under surface and then noise. This allows you to very quickly add a lot of variation and break up something like stones really quickly.
Okay. Do you have, from Hellspawn 117 Gamer, do you have any advice for people that want to make tabletop minis?
I actually don't.
Okay.
I haven't. I'm not familiar with that at all. I mean, like with anything, there's some general pieces of advice. If you want to do that for characters, you have to learn figure sculpting. If you don't know figure sculpting and you're trying to do anything, you're just fighting against the current. You have to learn figure sculpting if you want to do anything with characters in ZBrush.
So August is asking if you've changed your opinion about the drawing monitors. You actually are drawing on one right now.
Yeah, so I'm using like a screen tablet right now. One of the ones Morten made a video on it as well, and we have actually the exact same one. Well, we have a different one. We have different copies, but it's the same model. It's the Huion and 23 Canvas Pro, something like that, and I really like it. I've always really liked Cintiqs. Morten has been more apprehensive about the Cintiqs and the screen tablets or pen displays, but I really like them. I'm using it right now and I'm just drawing or sculpting on the screen. What I really like about it is that I'm very precise. Like, the strokes might not look great, but that's because I'm a crappy sculptor in the moment, but the sculpt goes exactly where it tells it to go. So if you are doing a lot of sculpting or concept art, I highly recommend getting one if it's within the budget. There might be some good Black Friday deals for specifically like the screen, the display tablets as well, but I have no idea.
Okay. Does Houdini have a big role in modeling? Is it worth learning it as a modeler?
Houdini is an interesting one. It depends what kind of modeling you want to do. You do become more valuable if you know Houdini as a modeler, because it allows you to be very good at proceduralism. If you want to be a character modeler, it's not going to help you a whole lot. But if you want to be a general modeler, Houdini will just help you. There's just no doubt about that. It means that you can very quickly create tools. You can create tools for your team, which can help you. It means that people can just simply input their tools or their things into Houdini. You can make some custom nodes for it. That's what we did at DNEG for vert reordering. They had I was using I just opened up Houdini, threw my models into a vert reorder node. I don't know anything about Houdini, but I was able to do that. Just throw it in there, and I could vert reorder my models, export them out, and that was really helpful.
When it comes to that, I do remember in Framestore when we needed a Houdini person, there was this one guy that knew Houdini and everybody was begging him to work for them. So yeah.
Yeah, Houdini is a really valuable tool. But if you want to be a sculptor, that's a completely different skill set. For sculpting, you should just focus on fundamentals and ZBrush. I'm just going to be saving now a little bit as well, because I always forget to save and then I lose all my work.
Okay.
The annoying thing about my display tablet is that my keyboard is behind the screen, so it's really awkward to type. I'm typing with one hand now. And I just got a new keyboard as well, so it's a bit unusual.
Okay. How is Mudbox different from ZBrush, from Nick?
Mudbox is severely underdeveloped. Mudbox used to be very similar and equal to ZBrush around 10 years ago. Then Autodesk acquired it, and after that they just kind of went the way of the dodo. Mudbox is no longer a developed tool. It can be good. It's far better at pipeline than ZBrush is. Pipeline in ZBrush is there are two things which do not go hand in hand. But I used Mudbox a fair bit in production, specifically for some features. One of the cool things about Mudbox is that you can import maps and you can sculpt on top of it. I know you can do that in ZBrush as well, but not with UDIMs, not to the same extent. So in Mudbox, we could import our UDIMs. You couldn't import the UDIMs as UDIMs. It used their own UV format, so you had to be like U1, V1. But we got somebody to write a script which renamed it for us. And then from there we could bring it in. And then I could take the texture maps. We did this a lot for Doomsday actually, for Batman v Superman, where I took a lot of the texture maps in and I just enhanced them. We painted the maps in Mari, brought them into Mudbox, and just really painted on top of that. For Pacific Rim, we did something similar, but for that, we did it in ZBrush instead, where instead of bringing in all the maps, you just brought in one map at a time. So for instance, if the head was one UDIM, you just isolated this UDIM, brought in the map, just through textures, flip it upside down, bring it in, and it will be overlaid on top. And then we sculpted on that, and then we needed a new one. I just brought that in, and that works. But in short, Mudbox is inferior when it comes to the sculpting experience, much better for pipeline, but it doesn't really matter because it's not a developed software at the moment.
Richard is asking how many hours a week of sculpting to get better.
I mean, it's not really an hours game per se, because you can in theory sculpt for like 50 hours without really getting better. It's about how you study. There is no amount of hours which is going to make you better. What matters is really how good are you at practicing. It is you do specific exercises to improve specific things, and you get feedback on that. You can have somebody who sculpts for 5 hours a week who improves tremendously because everything they do is outside the comfort zone. And then you have people who will sculpt for 30 hours a week, but it's all comfort zone and they don't actually learn anything. So how heavy is a stone? Well, it depends. There can be linearity between how many hours you sculpt and how good you're getting, but it really is about sculpt intently, sculpt with a goal in mind if you're studying. Meaning that right now I'm doing a foot study and I have specific reference for this foot. Once I'm done, I'm comparing it to my reference and I have other people feedback it, and you do that for everything. If you do that, you will improve really fast. But if you just keep sculpting comfort zone sculpts, kind of what I'm doing now, like this is not very hard for me in a sense. It's also doesn't look super good at the moment. But like this kind of sculpting is not something I'm improving at. If I want to improve doing these kind of sculpts, I have to do studies. I have to like find a sculpt like this. This is a scan and I try to replicate it as accurately as I can. And then from there, I'll try to improve. And like look at the reference and compare your work to that.
Okay. Lonely Mo is asking, when looking for a job right now as a modeler, what type of work should you show?
Yeah, that's actually more for you, actually, since you are more relevant. What do you think, Lupita?
Oh, I mean, for me, I think it depends what type of modeler you want to be as well, I guess. If you want to be more a generalist modeler, I think you should have a good range of hard surface work, organic work, and so on. If you're more generalist, I think you don't need to concentrate as much on having cool creatures. You should just have a good range of many things. And then if you want to be more of a character artist, that's when you should have the more organic character work that you know more about, I guess.
So the reason I asked you is because for the audience, if we don't know, Elpida just worked at Framestore as a modeler, which is most recent. She just finished work on Tom and Jerry some months ago, where the trailer just came out.
Yay.
So yeah, so if you have questions for Elpida as well, who's been working in VFX in the last year, which is much more recent than I have, she's also more than happy to answer your questions.
But if it helps, for my showreel I had a sculpt, like an organic sculpt. I had a hard surface model of a tractor, and then I had like another little panda or something, like another creature, and some show work that I had from working in TV before. So that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to show that what you're doing is valuable to the company. If you, for instance, have 3 tractors, you aren't necessarily that valuable because you can do tractors 3 times and they're pretty similar. But if you can show that you can do, like in your case, you can do a tractor and you can do organic sculpting and you can do maybe some environment work as well, then you are suddenly quite valuable because now they can throw you at a lot of different things. So show, like it's a unity with variation. You want to be generally a good modeler, but you want to show that there's a lot of variation within your skills as well.
Okay. Bjorn is asking, do you know a good introduction to ZBrush 2020 out there? Wink, wink.
Oh, wow, Bjorn. That's, who knows? Yes, if anyone wants to learn ZBrush 2020 or 2021, we have a really good introduction to sculpting, to introduction to ZBrush. That's something we finished about a year ago, just when ZBrush 2020 came out. There honestly isn't that much difference between the different versions of it, so this version is totally valid. So if anyone wants to learn how to use ZBrush, we do have a very solid introduction to ZBrush, where we teach you how to sculpt like a lot of ring style work at the end as well, like all. Yeah, so yes, Björn, thank you for that question. So if anyone needs more product recommendations. But yeah, just a little reminder that the sale just launched as well. So if anyone wants some nice tutorials, you're more than welcome to pop over to FlippedNormals and just pick something cool up.
Here, one person, Zach Torosa. I'm really sorry about all the names. Any tips on how to enhance Sculptree's pro performance?
No. Sculpt is like there isn't a whole lot you can do when it comes to improving like performance of different things. It is just use less polygons. When it comes to Sculptors Pro or Dynamesh, you don't want to take it up to like the millions of polys. Like now I'm kind of at like the max I would go for Dynamesh, where I'm like, maybe I'll take it up to like 2 million depending on the complexity, but it really is, you really don't want to go that high. So if you are currently trying to be at like 50 million, then I mean, you're going to be in for a very bad time. So if you want to improve performance, work with the tool instead of against the tool, and you're going to be much, much better off.
Okay. Well, Thomas Collier is asking, in order to learn sculpting various kinds of characters and creatures, would you recommend sticking to characters at first and to learn anatomy perfectly, or alternating with creatures as well? Yeah,
so the thing is, there is no such thing as like knowing anatomy. Like it seems to be like a misconception that you take an anatomy course and then you know anatomy. Anatomy is like a process. I still don't know anatomy. Like I'm learning anatomy every single sculpt I'm doing. There's always something new. So you're getting used to anatomy. There's always something new to learn. So, but I would recommend to start off with some figure sculpts. Get to a level where you're somehow comfortable with what's going on, and then you can move on. But it's not like you first only do humans, then you do animals. You can alternate between the two. When it comes to being a good sculptor, it's not like first you learn humans and then you learn animals and then you're fine. It becomes more fundamental than that. It becomes more about creating good form. If you know how to create good shapes, good appealing shapes, you can really create most things. And the anatomy isn't that different. There are some specifics which are different, like dogs don't have collarbones, and some of the placement of the scapula and such are a bit different. But they're fundamentally very similar. Like they're not aliens. Animals are generally humans in terms from a sculpture point of view, just with different proportions and some different muscles and some different bones here and there.
Alonso is asking if you also draw.
I used to. I don't anymore.
Okay.
Drawing is something which is a lot of fun, but for me, I just started doing CG instead, or just started doing actual 3D. You can draw as well in CG. Drawing is a lot of fun. A lot of people say that you should learn to draw first before you learn to become a sculptor, but you shouldn't. You should learn fundamentals. Like when I was drawing, I was pretty okay at drawing, but I still didn't know the fundamentals because I was just replicating photos. You don't learn anything from that by pure replication.
Jeremy Lefebvre, I'm really sorry again. Is it possible to switch from video games industry to VFX industry?
Oh yeah, you bet. When I was at MPC, just before I left, there were two guys who just, one guy who just did that. He just left from the studio which worked on Fable, and they were closing down, and he just started working at MPC right away. The cool thing about it is that if you know your fundamentals, then it's not that hard to make the switch. Because like a big difference between something like a senior and junior artist is not necessarily just their technical skills. It can also really well be their fundamentals. So then if you go from video games to film, you have to learn some new technical skills. Like you have to learn like how to use UV maps again. You have to learn to texture for film, and the quality of the asset is a lot higher in general. Like it's a different kind of quality. It's more focusing on the final asset. It's a lot more detailed. But it's very much possible. Just focus on the fundamentals and you'll be fine.
Dimitar Georgiev is asking, do you guys do any piece character reviews right now or no?
Piece character reviews?
You were doing portfolio reviews before.
Oh yeah,
that's
yeah.
What it's about.
No. No, it turns out when you're running your own business, it's a bit hard as well to do those. So a lot of times it just kind of turns into from personal work to FlippedNormals work.
People are saying they can't hear me very well, by the way. So I'll try to I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, just we'll just move the laptop a little bit closer.
We'll just squeeze.
Just squeeze it a little closer.
Oh my god.
For my sculpt now, by the way, just to review, like I don't know how we've been streaming now, how long we've been doing it, but what I'm doing is I'm generally just blocking it in. Like this is not good at this level. I'm fully aware of that. What I'm doing is I'm blocking in the main landmarks and I'm blocking in the main shapes, and I'm almost to the level now where I'll start to refine the shapes. Like now we have most things kind of there, and then it's gonna be a lot of work with the move brush, making sure that everything flows and that I'm consciously thinking about the appeal as well.
Tag user is asking, besides performance, which looks to be improved in either 2.91 or 2.92, what Blender specific quirks is holding it back from being considered seriously in a professional capacity for modeling?
Right, that's a good question. I'm actually just writing, I just finished an article yesterday about it. Why isn't Blender industry standard? For modeling, that's a tricky one. Blender is generally fairly solid in modeling. It's probably one of the things it's the best at. Where it is missing is some tools. Our first retopology is okay. It's not great, but it's okay. And UV mapping is not great at all. But for modeling, it's pretty much there. Like if I was doing modeling right now, I would need some add-ons. I would probably need a tool like Rism for UVs, which is really good for that. And I would probably need Topogun for topology. But for modeling, it's pretty much there. So it doesn't need a whole lot more things. It can be a bit hard to learn for people who's used to Maya, but I mean, the tool itself is pretty much there.
Have you been able to add the new cloth dynamics in ZBrush 2021 within your workflow? That's from Reese A.
Well, I tried. It's not very good, I found. Now, I tried it just when it came out, and I was just real discouraged from the results. Like it's not like a cloth system which replaces something like Ncloth or Marvelous at all. If anything, it would be something which would make it slightly better to make like some capes or some simple stuff. But I'm really not impressed by the cloth work in 2021. I found it very lacking, and it was weird. And I was just trying it on like a character like this. I was trying to make a plane just go above it and fall down. It just didn't work. It was intersecting with the character like crazy, and it just seems to be really buggy. And I don't find the results to be that good looking either. It looks very much like it's a cloth brush being applied instead of something more serious like Marvelous or something which is more, something which is simulated.
From Fritz Valencia, any creature texturing tips for beginners?
Creature texturing tips? Yes, I have a creature texturing tip. This is something that I just wrote about on this on Twitter a few days ago. But one of the things I learned in VFX was that the better your model is, the better your textures will be. That sounds a bit like a weird one, but like improve your model to improve your textures. But it's so often that if you're finding that if you have a really good model, like with all the pores and the scales and everything there, texturing is almost like you go over with like a soft brush and it looks great. But if it's a very soft model and you have to texture it, then you're trying to add so much into the texture, so much modeling into the texture. So really try to improve the model as much as you possibly can. Another tip as well is that this is kind of modeling as well, but the better your displacement map, the easier it is to texture. The reason I'm saying that is modeling is because a displacement map is literally moving polygons around. You're just doing it with a texture map. So the better your modeling is, the better your texturing is going to be. Also, keep it very simple. Texturing tends to be too complicated. Like there are so many maps you need and so many pieces of terminology, but it can be really quite simple. First, make a good model. Really just make it nice, but just spend your time, make sure your mid-frequency is there, and then you can block in some colors, like an albedo and all that. Then you have a roughness map, then you can have a bump map, and you don't need a whole lot more than that. If you have a solid model, if you have a color, a roughness, and a bump and a displacement map, you kind of have it. So just keep it really simple.
Okay, Larry Burr. is asking, is a short film better than separate pieces for a demo reel?
I actually think a short film is one of the worst things you can have for a demo reel. And I'll explain that one, because this is something I've seen a lot, including from my own school, where they required us to make a short film. It depends what you're optimizing for. If you want to tell a story and you want to go into something like cinematography, it might be better to make a short film, particularly if you want to do writing or directing. But for that, you're optimizing for fast shots, quick iteration times, meaning short render times, and you want to tell the story. If you want to be a visual artist, meaning that what you're doing is inherently more like what you're optimizing it for is the most beautiful end result. Then you want long render times and you want all the details to really be there in shot, and you don't necessarily care that much about the story. Then you should really just make specific shots. Like what I would do if I was in school now and I had to make a short film, or if I have to make a portfolio and they were asking me to make a short film, I would do like one of my friends did at the animation workshop, he just made a commercial instead. 30-second commercial where there is some narrative or something like that, but it's mostly just like a nice visual presentation, because then you can really focus on a few shots and really making them as nice as possible. If you're doing a short film and let's say it becomes something like 7 minutes, which you might need in order to tell a story, then you have like something like 2 minutes per frame to render, which is nothing, particularly if you're going for something more real. It's almost impossible to do a realistic short film, which also tells a story. And if that's what you're trying to do, just don't tell the story and just focus on making a cool commercial for something. Just make up a product. Like just make up like you're doing a mech robot and you're trying to sell a mech robot, or you're trying to sell like makeup to an ogre family or something. just make something cool up and just stick to that.
Likely to Explode is asking, how hard is it for you to look past the amount of likes or general reception your work gets online and focus on improving and staying positive?
Yeah, you should probably, if you are, for instance, on Twitter, it's probably a good idea to find some kind of add-on to Firefox or Chrome which actually hides the like count. We made a whole video about this actually, where it's like measure what matters, and it's incredibly important to measure what matters, because if you measure the likes as a success ratio, that means you're gonna be doing more to optimize for likes. Again, it comes down to what do you optimize for? Do you optimize for getting better, or do you optimize for getting likes? Those two things are not the same. If you optimize for getting better, you'll do a lot of ugly studies. They're not gonna look nice. And even if they do nice, it's gonna be like a study of some hands or like some pecs or something like that. But if you want likes, just make a naked woman or something. So it shouldn't be like that. But it works. Make fan art, make something more sexy. So figure out what you want to focus on, and which should hopefully be improvement, and then make pieces like that. It is hard. How do you ignore the likes? How do you ignore that dopamine hit? But I don't know. I don't know how you do that. But it really boils down to focusing on what's important to you. And if learning is important to you, you just have to be conscious about the fact that likes cannot measure learning. Likes measures engagement, which is a completely different thing from learning.
I think it's good to mention that what gets a lot of likes is not always what's employable.
No.
It's just what's popular right now, which, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to get tons of likes right now, you make some Witcher fan art or some Among Us fan art, and you do a little twist on it. You make Geralt into a woman, or you make Among Us into skeletons, or whatever. Like you can get tons of likes because people find it to be funny or provocative or something. But people who review your work for a portfolio, they don't care about that. They're just like, all right, cool, that was a funny little piece. Can you model? Can you texture?
Okay, Nicholas is asking, in what ways do you see ZBrush being applicable for Archface and architectural design?
Not a whole lot, to be honest. Particularly for like Archface, because in Archface you're doing, architectural visualization, which a lot of times you won't really be modeling necessarily. You're using a lot of model libraries and such. So for that, I don't see ZBrush as a very important tool. If anything, maybe if you have some pillows and you have to sculpt them up, or something which requires just a bit of undulation, maybe you have some terrains outside which you have to work on it. But I really don't see ZBrush as an essential tool for Archface artists. Maybe I might be wrong there. That's just my personal thoughts on it.
Okay. Undefined HP. Undefined? Undefined. Oh my god, my English. I was wondering how difficult is it to getting a job in another country as someone new to the game industry? What do you think would help to get a job like that portfolio-wise?
Yeah, that's a kind of two-part question, because how difficult is it to get a job in another country? Like, for instance, me, I'm Norwegian. For me to go to Denmark it's super easy. I just move here and just tell Denmark that, hey, I'm living in Denmark now. So in terms of visas, that's not a problem. But if I want to go to the US right now, and I don't want to, but let's say I want to, then it's going to be very hard for me to do that, just because of the visa application process. Getting a green card is very tricky. So if you need a visa, it becomes very hard, because then the company has to sponsor you. If you don't need a visa, then you're essentially online, like in the same realm as everyone else who applies. So then it's not necessarily that much harder. If you are from Denmark and you're applying for a job in Norway, you're basically standing at the same level as somebody from Norway applying.
Okay. What software is being used in the industry, Maya or Blender?
That would be a little of both. First, it depends what industry you're talking about, but let's say it's in film. Little both. I know this is probably trying to trigger me, but as a main software, it's by far Maya. Like Blender's market share is right now is tiny. It's getting better, but like it's not replacing particularly the rigging and animation. There's just no way it's taking over that anytime soon. The tools in Maya are better, and that's what people know. In terms of modeling, people can kind of use whatever they want to, because modeling is not really tied to a pipeline to the same extent. It uses very industry standard formats like OBJ and Lembic, so you can use whatever you want to. And also for the art department, no art department will use Maya, because Maya is terrible for that stuff. It's so slow. So it's being used a lot more and more in art departments. I know for a fact that Framestore is using Blender a lot for their visualization. So it's a bit of both. But I mean, Maya is not going away as a production tool anytime soon.
Oddstreet is asking, how do you do hair for a character? I'm new to ZBrush, but I'm loving sculpting in 3D.
So if you're doing hair, then you should keep an eye out on a product we're going to have out after Black Friday at some point, which is called Introduction to XGen. It's made by a guy by Michael, who used to be an NPC groomer, and he talks about how to do a really nice groom. XGen is a bit of a weird tool. It can be a bit buggy, a little bit buggy, but it's generally a good grooming tool. Like, it can produce gorgeous results. If you want stylized fur and stylized hair and all that, then you can sculpt on a ZBrush, okay. But if you want like realism, you really, particularly for something like VFX, you really have to use like a specialized tool like XGen, or maybe something like Yeti, or you can even use Houdini, which is getting better and better at it.
Stergos is asking, would it be better to sculpt an existing character or creature concept perfectly, or try to do a super complex creature design that may not be executed as perfect, but is from your own imagination? I
always encourage people, when it comes to, it depends what you want to optimize for. But if you want to optimize for the final quality, use existing concept art. I've seen this so many times where you have good 3D artists. They're great 3D artists, but their work is crap. And the reason is because they are using their own concept art. In order to make good concept art, you pretty much have to be a concept artist. It is really hard to make your own concept art. Like, it's way harder than you think. So I really don't think it's a good idea to do it, because then you're not showing anything off. Then you're just showing off that you can't do concept art. And it really makes your art worse, I think. Like, if you want to do it for fun, then go ahead. If you want to bring your own visions to life, that's awesome. Do that. But if you want to show off work in a portfolio, I cannot recommend working off existing concept art enough. Go to ArtStation, find some good concept art there, ask the artist for permission, and work based on that. Your portfolio will be so much better. We've seen this now with the Sculpting Challenge, which actually Pete has been helping really run and doing a good job at, has been the people who's been using concept art, even though they've been like fairly okay 3D artists, but not amazing, they've had really good submissions. And you had some people who's been maybe stronger 3D artists, but they used their own concepts. Their submissions are weaker. So it's like you can accelerate your own work significantly by using existing concept art.
Sure. Oda24C SBD9. I'm a student and I'm working on portfolio pieces that are separate from my studies. Would you recommend focusing on several small renders or a large render combining multiple elements?
Ooh, I really don't know. No, actually, I think I do know. If you want to, again, it's back to the whole idea. What do you optimize for? If you optimize for learning, then you should do a lot of smaller studies, because then you can get the iteration time down. It means you can do a lot more pieces and in a lot quicker succession. It means you can learn a lot more.
They're asking for portfolio though.
But for portfolio pieces, then you shouldn't really show studies to the same extent. For portfolio pieces, you should assume that what you have in portfolio is the same work as the studio or the client you're applying for can already do. And nobody commissions studies. You should really show work which is as finished as possible, where if somebody is critiquing your reel or your portfolio in an interview, you're going like, no, this is fully rendered, everything is here. You don't want them to go, oh yeah, but this is just a study. Why is it just a study? You really want to stay on top of that and present your work as well as it can be.
Tyler James is asking, did you ever think about joining the collective industry?
Nope.
Collectibles.
No, I didn't. Pretty sure it was Tyler James, the one who won the Sculpting Challenge last week.
Yeah, I think it was week
or
one.
Week one, yeah?
Yeah, week one for mythology. If that's you, good job.
Yeah, good job, Tyler. But yeah, I didn't really think about that. Also, when I started with this, there wasn't really so much of a thing back then. 3D printing has got a lot cheaper and more affordable, and no, it looks cool though. I mean, it looks like an awesome industry.
He's asking about your PC specs.
I have no idea.
Okay, great, nice.
I have RTX 2070, I think, and I have 16 gigs of RAM, and I have a terabyte SSD. Like it doesn't matter a whole lot because I don't do a whole lot of very heavy work right now. I recommend getting at least 32 gigs of RAM. I only have 16, and it is really nice if you have a good graphics card. That I have a pretty decent graphics card, which not crazy good, but it's pretty decent, and it means that I can use GPU rendering. If you can use GPU rendering, that makes your life so much easier if you actually want to render.
I'm also finding right now that an SSD is not that expensive and it's adding a lot. SSD
is like a must-have. I would never have a computer there without an SSD. Like for my MacBook, I have a terabyte of there as well, and it's just so nice to have a powerful SSD.
Comics Legend is asking, can you set the collision tolerance to fix intersecting geometry?
So that was I guess this is a question where like I was saying it was intersecting with the clothing before, but like it was just broken. I tried all the things. It was just broken, but maybe it's been fixed now. I know there's a new update to it. Like this is ZBrush 2021 1.2. So maybe they fixed something there, but yeah, in general I just wasn't very impressed with the clothing.
Okay. Nick Perfetti is asking, any tutorials on how to add scales and stuff when sculpting in Blender?
No, I don't think so. The problem with sculpting something like scales in Blender is that scales are tricky to get right in sculpting, because it requires such a high poly count, and that's something I'm not sure how Blender handles at the moment. If it comes to sculpting scales, I recommend, at least if it's like some fish scales or something from like a lizard, I recommend doing that maybe more as a tileable in something like Substance Painter or Mari, because that's just a lot easier to do. I recommend getting a good, or making a good tileable scales map, and then tiling it across, and then maybe baking it down and working with it from there.
Architect is asking, senior year is coming and college applications for me end of November 30th, and I live in California and I can't find a 3D modeler specified uni. Should I just join something like Vertex School or CGMA?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? What do you do with university?
You buy FlippedNormals tutorials.
You buy a lot of FlippedNormals tutorials. If you know what you want to do, then doing something like CGMA is not a bad idea, because it means that you're getting pretty high quality education, but you have to be prepared to put a lot of work. This was something I was saying earlier in the stream, that for 3D modeling specifically, you are not going to find a university which just does 3D modeling. Like, I don't think that exists in the world. And 3 years of that would also be pretty excessive as well. You don't need 3 full years for that. So yeah, I don't know. Look around for CGMA, figure out what level you're currently at. Something like CGMA and self-study generally lends itself to somebody who's already at a level where they're more comfortable. If you are a complete beginner, I don't necessarily recommend those, because you just need some hand holding in the beginning.
Yeah. Can you recommend any modeling contests where you can get good feedback and attention from pros besides the rookies?
No. No, that's actually that's something that Peter and I here have talked a fair bit about. Like, how do you get feedback on your work? And it's very hard. We're starting to offer mentorships now for FlippedNormals, but it's still very early on, and I'm just taking on like one at a time. But it's tricky. You can look for the Mentor Coalition. The Mentor Coalition is a bunch of guys who offer mentorships, which are fairly affordable as far as I understand, and that means you get personalized feedback. But yeah, it is hard to get feedback from professionals. You might, if you want my advice on how to get professional feedback, is write a quick email to some people on ArtStation, maybe find their email, right, and be brief about it. Be curt in the email and go, hey, I really like your work. I was hoping you give me some quick feedback on it. This is specific to what I want feedback on. Here is the images attached. What would you like to? How would you improve this? The problem is if you ask somebody for feedback and you're like, hey, can I get some feedback on this? They're going like, yeah, on what? Just, on the piece. And then there are 3 and 4 emails back and forth before they know what to focus on. Mm-hmm. So be specific in your request, and then go from there. If you write me an email asking for feedback and I have to open up ZBrush, I have to download your file, like, it's not that you get a reply later on because I have to open up ZBrush. You probably just aren't ever getting a reply because we just don't have time for it. So be specific.
I would also say, if you do get feedback, send a thank you message, send that you appreciate it, because it is annoying when you spend time to give feedback to someone and you feel ignored afterwards. It's
so annoying. Like, I've done this a few times where you give somebody some pretty decent feedback and you set aside time for it and they just reply thanks. Cheers. That's really nice.
Yeah. Let me see. What if I'm from a third world country? Is it possible to find a job outside? That's from Nathan.
100%. If you are from a country which doesn't offer the same job prospects as you might have in the North America or in Europe, it's still totally doable. I worked with people in VFX, like in London, who were from India, and they were some of the best people I worked with. It is a bit harder, just because it is just a bit harder if you're from a country like that. But It is 100% doable. You don't need that fancy of a computer to work today to get a lot of high quality work done. For instance, with ZBrush, ZBrush runs on a potato. Like you can run ZBrush on like a toaster. I used to run ZBrush on my high school laptop, like 2006 model, like with like 4 gigs of RAM. Like you can run it on anything. You can, if you get a cheap tablet, maybe second hand, you can make something there. If you want to get software, you can get Blender really, I mean, for free. And yeah, it's 100% doable.
Okay. Sir Gibbs is asking, do the skills required for a 3D environment artist for film differ from the skills required for being an environment artist for games?
You are asking the wrong guy, mister. I have not worked in games, nor have I been an environment artist. And the reason I'm not trying to answer these questions is it's not because I don't want to take a stab at it. It's because I don't want to provide false information. If you want like I can ask general 3D questions and general career things, but I don't want to give specific advice for these things just because I might give the wrong advice.
Okay, Barham is asking, hi guys, in which ways or positions can you money or make a salary by knowing sculpting?
In which positions?
Yes.
Right, that's a good one. One is a character modeler for both film and games. That's a pretty common way of doing it. Another one can be as a collectible artist. It can be as a freelance concept artist. There are many positions which requires figure sculpting. I know one guy he would make sculptures for rich Russian guys, and they would those guys they would commission sculptors, marble sculptures in Italy. But those guys they didn't want to just like wing it, so they would get ZBrush sculptors to do the initial sculpt, maybe 3D print it, and then just have a really good reference for it. So if you are a good figure sculptor, there is a lot of work available. The thing here is just good. That's the hard part of it, because figure sculpting is just inherently a hard skill.
Mattia is asking, as a beginner in 3D, how long do you think you need to learn all industry standard softwares in order to create decent projects?
I mean, within like a year or two of like fairly intense studies, you'll have a decent grasp of most things. One of the hardest things is not just the software per se, it's also just figuring out the fundamentals. Like when Morten and I were learning Blender, we were able to do that from basically nothing to like a pretty adequate level within a month. But a beginner to 3D wouldn't be able to do that, because we just had to learn where our tools were. Like somebody took my toolbox and just threw it around and have to pick it up again. Somebody who's new to 3D will have to learn what they are. So it depends. The hard thing is learning the fundamental skills of a 3D artist. It also, for instance, for texturing, learning Substance Painter, just the software, you can do that in like a few days to like a week. But learning how to texture will take a long time, because learning texturing is understanding surface control and it's understanding the different maps. So there are a lot of technical skills to learn there.
Marthel Arts is asking, if you have multiple skills, programming, 3D modeling, texturing, animation, would it be worth to show an Unreal 4 minigame or scene where it shows off everything, or should I focus on one skill?
Right, that's a gaming question. I'm a little bit careful with those. It also depends on if you're good at it. Like if you can show off that you have a decent skill set in all of them, that might be useful. But it depends if you're like just adequate at it. Like if you can make a crappy demo but you show off all the skills, I wouldn't do that. But if you can show that you actually know those skills really well, then it's valuable for sure. Then it means there are more positions for you in every company you can work at.
Jack T Does 3D is asking, I use Blender and it's free, and I don't have the budget to get ZBrush. Would it be worth to get ZBrush sculpting course to get better at sculpting, or is it different to translate?
So that's a good question. It depends what courses you're getting. If you're getting, like, for instance, our introduction to ZBrush, that is not going to help you getting better at that, because that is not a sculpting course. That's a ZBrush course. But if you are getting, for instance, our introduction to sculpting course, that's mostly software agnostic. Like there are some specific ZBrush things here and there, but it is generally a software agnostic one. So if the tutorial teaches you sculpting, it's phenomenal for you. If it teaches you ZBrush, you're just going to be stuck with and not understand anything. So I do want to plug our introduction to sculpting course. That's a course I made as well, so I'm a bit attached to that. But that's a course where we try to put everything we learned or we know about sculpting into one course, not the ZBrush specifics, but more how do you think about things? When I'm sculpting right now, what am I actually thinking about? How can you approach any subject and kind of get a feeling for how can you get tools in order to sculpt anything? So I recommend that specific course for that, but you want to be careful with general ZBrush sculpting classes, just because they might just teach you specifics in ZBrush. Knowing array mesh in ZBrush is not going to help you if you are using Blender.
If you want to work as a character artist, no, sorry, I was going to read another one. Sorry. A few people are asking, what tablet are you using?
I'm using Huion Canvas 23 Pro Plus something.
Was it 22?
22.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just came out like a few months ago. Yeah. But yeah, 22-inch Huion display screen.
Juan is asking, if you want to be a character artist, should you do environment props or should you just concentrate on character art?
If you want to be a character artist, you really have to show that you are excellent at figure sculpting and your understanding of that. But the problem is that it's very hard to... It can be hard to get the job as a character modeler. So if you're a student and you want to get the job as a character modeler, you don't necessarily want to put all your eggs in one basket and just do character modeling. What I was doing, I was pretty decent at character modeling out of university, but I just assumed it would take me a few years to get into that like professionally. So I deliberately made a reel which contained some environment work, some prop work, and some general 3D modeling work. So I would say it depends. If you're really, really good, it might be worth putting your eggs in one basket. But if you're not sure, and you should be sure before you do that, you should ask professionals about this, and you should get some feedback on that. But if you're not sure, it's worth trying to become a character artist maybe a bit later in your career and focusing more on getting the foot in the door.
To be fair, even if you do get a job at first, you might still end up doing props, even though you're applying for character art.
One of the reasons why I want to elaborate on that as well. One of the reasons why is because as a character artist, you're not just sculpting all day long. You have to be solid when it comes to the general pipeline as well. It's not just sculpt characters and sculpt this kind of stuff all day. It also is, hey, we got this model in and we have to change the UVs, but we can't change the skinning of the rig or anything like that, and we have to reproject in ZBrush. How do you do that? How do you do that in a non-destructive manner? There are just some things you just have to know in order to become a character artist.
Flowkey is asking, for 3D print, is it better to sculpt an orthographic view or perspective view?
Well, I mean, I'm not a 3D printing artist, but I assume it's better to sculpt in perspective view because that's how you're going to be reviewing it. It's like if you are like you don't have orthographic view in real life. Like, doesn't happen. You only have perspective view. So if you're going to be, you should be sculpting what's closest to how it's going to be reviewed. Same as now, like I'm actually sculpting in ortho view right now. If you're going to be sculpting in ortho view and you're going to be using shots for perspective view, you're going to be in a bit of a trouble because now the model looks completely different.
Laurie is asking, is it better to upload the best art pieces I have now on ArtStation or wait until I have improved?
Yeah, your ArtStation should be as current as possible, and don't wait, just put it up there, and then once you get more things, just replace it. What you can do, you can make like a little game with yourself. You're only allowed to have 5 pieces in your ArtStation. If you go above that, you have to replace one. you can of course set that to whatever, and if you have 5 and you really liked one of like all 5, you can keep it. But particularly when you're learning, it's not a bad idea to have the mindset of, if you add something, you replace it, because that means you're always iterating and improving your portfolio.
Fish Knight is asking, when creating a model that will be used for animation, what is the difference between A pose and T pose?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the difference between A pose and T pose is like, what I'm doing now is kind of A pose. It means just like his arms are just going more in an A, and T pose is like his arms are going straight out. One of the problems with T pose is that you're really compensating like in a crazy way for the shoulders. Like you're just squashing the shoulders up, and it's very hard to visualize how it's going to look at the end. Particularly if you're doing something more like as a fantasy creature, you might end up in a case where he actually can't deform his shoulders properly. So I really prefer, when I'm modeling, to model in something like this pose, where now there is a clear cut where the shoulder goes, there's a clear cut where the elbow goes, and there's a clear cut where the wrist goes. This means that there is no ambiguity as to what your as where the bones are going to be or the joints are going to be in the rig, and it just becomes a lot easier. So I think for me, T pose is the devil and A pose is the nice way of go about it.
Isn't it easier for riggers to also work on an A pose because there's no deformation there sculpted in already?
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise the riggers will kind of have to compensate. But I know some rigging systems work differently, so I don't want to say that decisively. Okay. But generally I think they work better with an A pose. Just because it's more neutral. But for showreel purposes, it doesn't really make any sense to put it in T pose. You just have to. T pose is so far away from the final pose you're going to be putting your model in that it is just going to harm you. So you really just put them into the A pose right away. Sometimes I'll even model it in a far more extreme pose if it's closer to a pose I'm going to be modeling it in. Like if we had a pose which was going to be, I didn't actually bring this reference here, but if it was a pose where the head was going to be down like this always, I might just model the head being down, because then I know more about the final thing. That's obviously more if you know for a fact it's going to be a static sculpture.
Just trying to find questions. There's a lot of just chit chat.
Okay.
Juan is asking, how do you work with ropes and cables? Is there a pipeline you would recommend?
Yeah, good question. That's a rigging question. I don't actually know.
There's a lot of tools out there for that, actually. Creatives. Hyper Dream Surfer is asking for creative skills that help with other creative skills.
Core design is a general thing which just helps a lot. That means you're understanding that a lot of things start with the emotional quality you want to get across, and then everything goes from there. Do you want this guy here to feel powerful? Well, then we're going to make him really broad. If you want to make this guy feel powerful, you do this. You make him feel broad. You make everything feel like strong. If you want to make him feel weak, you make everything more scrawny. Core design skills comes down to having a solid understanding of color, of composition, it's a skill which you can use to create logos as well as character designs and designing composition. It's very hard to do. You can learn it by analyzing master studies by some of the old painters and really analyzing them in a simple thumbnail view. Breaking down good character designs into simple shapes. But it's an incredibly hard skill to pinpoint down. And how do you learn core design is really not a simple answer.
What was your experience like getting into 3D, and what are signs that one should pursue it as a career rather than just stick to it as a hobby? That's from God John.
Yeah, so if you want to have the whole story of how I got into 3D, we have a video on this, something like the first 15 years of our collective experience with Morten and I just recommend checking that one out for that whole thing, because that's too long for a quick answer. But to figure out if you want to do it as a career, do you enjoy doing it? That's a big thing. If you really enjoy doing it, there is a viable career path there as well. And then if your skills aren't up to par, well, you can always get better at your skills. But yeah, if you enjoy doing 3D, that's a pretty good indicator. If you don't enjoy doing 3D, then definitely don't do it as a career. But if you're having a lot of fun with 3D and all the learning involved in all the community, then go for it.
Evgenia, if you're Greek, any advice on how to choose a path in 3D? I like them all. Is a generalist considered a good level artist in multiple skills, or should I specify in a particular path?
My opinion on being a generalist is that being a generalist is kind of a specialization by itself, because it means at that point you know a lot of things about a lot of things. You don't specialize in any one thing, but it means that you have the skills to take like maybe a full shot from start to finish. Maybe not the most technical shot, maybe not the shot which has all the creature work and all that, but it means that you know how to troubleshoot a lot of things and how to just have a lot of work on your shoulders, which is really valuable. If you're at a smaller studio, they will basically all be generalists. The bigger studios, they become more specialists, but the environment department is usually an exception. How do you find your path? That is just so that it depends so much on you as a person. If you find something you really enjoy and you keep going back to that, maybe that's a good path in for you. Or if you enjoy everything equally, for instance, if you enjoy sculpting as much as you enjoy rigging, as you enjoy grooming, then you might want to look into what's the most viable career path. For instance, if you want to be, it's probably easier if you're good at being a rigger. It's probably easier to get a job as a rigger than it is to get a job as a ZBrush sculptor, just because there are a lot more people who want to become ZBrush sculptors, and there's always a need for riggers. Same with groomers as well. You can't really. Every single character has a groom to some extent. If you were to do this guy, he would have a lot of hair on him, but it's very hard to find somebody who's good at grooming. So if you enjoy everything equally, then it's worth looking into how viable is it as a career path. A viable career path is anything to do with Houdini.
It's also with a generalist, there's a lot of work in advertising and TV.
Yeah.
She mentioned that.
Yeah, there's less work in as a generalist in film, but there was a lot of work in advertisement and TV, just because then they have to get shots out so quickly, and instead of going between 10 different artists, they do much rather go between like a few artists who can just do the work themselves.
Clone Gentleman is asking the real question: pizza or burgers?
Ooh, pizza.
Okay. With pineapple?
No.
Okay. How much of your skills did you develop before you started working, and how much came from working in the industry?
It's kind of like, it's a tricky question, because I feel when I was in VFX, I didn't learn a whole lot of like new skills. Like my skills, if I had to like list my set of skills when I got into VFX, I was pretty similar to when I went out of it. But the difference was I got a lot better at it. I didn't really pick up a whole new thing that, I didn't know how to do hard surface modeling, but now I know how to do it. But it was more that I got significantly better at doing it. It meant in the beginning, for instance, when I started in VFX, I could do general character sculpting, but by the time I've been doing it for a few years, I could do it to a really high level and in a reliable fashion, where I knew what requirement was needed. I could handle more of the heavy pipeline work. I could communicate more with the leads, and I could more like scope out jobs. So it was more when I started working, it started becoming more. I became a lot more refined, and I started considering the fundamentals a lot more.
Asmodeo is asking, why are your references not real balls? Is it better to use statues and drawings for references?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the reasons is because I found them on Google really quickly. It's usually a good idea to have both. The problem with a reference like this is that it's somebody interpretation, which has already been done. But the advantage of this is that they've already done a fair bit of work for me. They've defined the main muscles and they've simplified a lot of things for me as a sculptor. Sorry about that.
Glug, 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 glug. So Alonso is asking, just out of curiosity, how long have you been doing 3D in general?
I have been doing 3D for 14 years this year.
It's quite a while.
Yeah, it's quite a while. I started with Photoshop when I was a bit younger, so 15 years since I started with it. I'm turning 30 now in a few months, which is a little scary. So I've been doing 3D for essentially half my life now. So that's...
If your 3D career was a human, it would be a teenager.
Yeah, basically. It's pretty weird.
Do you have to be good at, or at least have decent knowledge of grooming to be a creature character artist?
No. Nope. I didn't really know anything about grooming when I was doing it. One of the reasons is because tools have traditionally been so terrible. They're still not great, but of course it helps, but it's in no way a requirement to be a groomer. But it can help you because it's more like if work dries out for a bit, groomers are always welcome.
Harshpreet Singh asks, for a person who never drew, how do you start getting into ZBrush?
Yeah, drawing is not a requirement for ZBrush at all. If you want to get good in ZBrush, you open up ZBrush and you start sculpting. If you are serious about this, I do recommend that you if you want to spend a little bit of cash on it, we have the Introduction to ZBrush course and we have Intro to Sculpting, which are currently now 50% off. That would help you to actually learn the software, but then also learn sculpting concepts as well. Drawing is not a requirement. Like, drawing is just another way of visually communicating ideas. You can be a great ZBrush artist and have no idea how to draw.
Okay, Nikolai is asking a more specific question. What should be done with UV coordinates while subdividing? ZBrush cannot smooth out the boundaries on the shells, only inside them. Is it worth smoothing UVs or the linear work UVs, or the linear method is okay? Sorry.
Yeah, so essentially, if you're dealing with anything to do with UVs and ZBrush and production, first you should buy some whiskey. Then you should consume said whiskey, and then you cry a lot repeatedly. UVs for ZBrush is just one of these things which is just really painful. The way we did it in production is that our models were so high poly that we just kind of hoped that we wouldn't have UV seams. The way we ended up with fixing the UV seams because of the crappy algorithms of ZBrush was that we had a lot of motion blur. If you were to pause, like if you were to look at Pacific Rim 2 and you were to pause a lot of our frames with our beautiful kaijus in it, you would see UV seams, you would see displacement seams on it. We tried to hide it by putting stuff on top of it, but it is just part of life in that sense. A way of doing it, to deal with it, is you pre-smooth your models in Maya first so it fits with the way you render, and then you bring it into ZBrush and you can reproject it. But honestly, it's UV interpolation in ZBrush is just like, it's not my problem anymore because I'm not in VFX, but when I was in VFX, that was a real concern. Like, it was one of those weirdly weird concerns. It shouldn't be a problem, but it's one of these small little things which ate up a lot of my time.
Nathan is saying, everybody's asking about 3D, but nobody's asking, how are you doing, Henning?
I'm good. Sitting in Denmark and enjoying my time, and I have some Toblerone on my desk. Thank you for asking, Nathan. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Stergos is asking, is fan art acceptable for a Sculpt November challenge, or would it be problematic?
Fine art, like
Fan art.
Fan art, yeah, do fan art, do your thing. I mean, I'm basically doing Asterios now from Hades, kinda. Yeah, I mean, do your thing. Like we don't judge. Well, we literally judge. Sorry about that. But yeah, fan art is 100% acceptable.
I mean, the last winner was fan art of Wicked, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it was.
Yeah, the last winner was actually fan art in a way.
Yeah, so yeah, do your thing. The thing is, for the sculpting challenge, we just want to plug the sculpting challenge. If you go to any one of our social media, you're going to see that we're posting that. It's just a quick social media challenge, nothing fancy on a forum. Just post some work in progress. Choose the theme for the week, which this week is ancient, which is why I'm doing like a mythological creature, because it's an ancient creature. And just tag us, hashtag with Sculpt November as well, and then do it. We're not here to restrict people. If you really want to do some fan art, that's awesome. We just want to encourage people to sculpt. And the winner isn't necessarily the one who does the best sculpt. We really encourage people to post work in progress work and really share their thoughts and their struggles and ask for feedback in the community. And it's a learning challenge, essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Somebody's asking if there'll be Sculpt December as well.
Probably not,
Yeah.
because these FlippedNormals boys, they need some rest.
Yes. Any from 12 Carty, any advice on ergonomics? How do you prevent yourself from straining or affecting your health while working? Yeah,
one of the things I've been hurt a lot through my career. One of the reasons was, first off, the first time I got hurt. Okay, we'll tell this through stories, like the good Greeks we are here. So first I got hurt when I was in uni, and I worked way too much. I was so enthusiastic about finally having a time in my life where I could just work my ass off, but I ended up working till like 2-3 a.m. every single day, and that hurt me. Like, I still have issues with my body sometimes because of that. I nearly got like chronic issues with my back and my arms and my hands, to the point that I thought I would drop out of school. So I stopped doing that, and I started doing a lot of stretches. But you don't want to do stretches to like counter it. You want to not overwork yourself. So step 1, set limits. Get enough sleep, set limits, get enough rest, and start going to the gym or do similar exercises. Do yoga, go and lift, do calisthenics. Just do something which keeps you active and keeps your muscles moving. Then get a good chair. That depends on your budget, of course. If you're doing a lot of freelance, I really recommend investing in a proper one. Like, get a proper chair, and even if it's expensive, it's not expensive. It will save you a significant amount of pain and issues. Once you get hurt, it's hard to recover. And then also smaller things, like now, for instance, when I'm sculpting, I have a sculpting glove on my hand, because I find that if I don't have that, I know some people don't, but if I don't have that personally, I get a lot of wrist pain, and doing that for prolonged periods of time is really painful. Also, take breaks, take regular breaks, and rest your body. Like, if you sculpt for 10 hours a day, you will get hurt 100%. So take breaks, play some games, and just recover mentally and physically.
Vinamra is asking, so what are you doing with this sculpt? Are you apologizing? Are you going to render it?
This is just a sculpt for fun. This is not going to be anything more serious than this. I'm probably going to keep sculpting it this entire week, just to have something to do, and it's a fun little thing, but I'm probably not going to retouch with a texture or something. It's probably going to end up just being a ZBrush sculpt.
Severus is asking, do I have to sculpt realistic human heads and bodies for practice?
Well, if you want to be good at human heads, if you want to be good at sculpting human heads, you have to sculpt realistic human heads. There is just no way around that. The best way to learn to make humans is to make humans. If you don't care about that skill, you really don't have to. You can be a phenomenal 3D artist without ever having to touch ZBrush or anything organic. But if you do want to become anything to do with characters, you have to be at a certain level when it comes to it. It's not like you need to sculpt without reference or anything like that. But the better your sculpts can be, just naturally without needing the support of reference and scans and all that, just the easier it's going to be for you.
Saeed is asking, how can I change my model's pose after I finish the sculpt without breaking the shapes?
Yeah, you can. One of the ways you can do that is you can first, it starts with maybe an unexpected area, but instead of just figuring a way to avoid testing or avoid breaking it, it's you test your pose beforehand. When you're at this stage right now, for instance, you can do a quick zero mesh test, and then you can start to block in what I'm doing now, like maybe some polygroups. This is going to be pretty crappy and old and slow, but we can do something like this. We can just soften off a little bit, and then we can start to test our design. We can start to do this, and we can start to move it up like so, and we can just see, does the design work? If the design doesn't work at this point, for instance, you're having issues with the armpits, or the arms are too short or too long, then you're in trouble and you have to fix it at this stage. When you're in the concept sculpting phase, you need to test the range of motion. There were so many issues in basically every single movie I ever worked on because we did not test range of motion. The reason was simply because we didn't allocate time for it in the budget. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was just we just didn't have time for it, which ended up costing us a lot of time. Then the second thing you can do once you've done that is have good, clean topology with proper polygroups. And that makes it a lot easier to fix it later on if you need corrective shapes.
Yasuchi is also asking, how should they pose? Should they rig them and pose them? Should they?
The way I prefer to pose a model is to take them into something like Maya. It can also be Blender, doesn't matter. Find an auto rig, throw it in there, do some quick weight painting. For a character like this, the weight painting would be very standardized. Like there isn't really anything crazy going on in that sense. So make a basic rig, work with what you have there, and then quickly just pose it up. See if you know an animator. Well, easier said than done, but if you know somebody who works with animation and is good at posing, ask them for feedback. That's going to help you a lot. The advantage of using a rig versus doing a ZBrush is because you have systems like IK, which means that it's so much easier to pose things like hands, and it's easier to change things like the hips as well without affecting the entire body. So for instance, with this guy here, I could simply just rotate his hips a little around. So it's so much less destructive.
Will 3D artists in general be more in demand in the future? That's from Ilkin.
I think it's highly likely that 3D artists will be in more demand in the future. It's already growing. You see all the streaming services popping up now. Just for that, they need more. Content. They can't get enough content fast enough. Everyone wants some nice VFX, some nice 3D. There are more games being produced now. There's more demand for everything relating to that. But also a lot of industries are also moving towards 3D as well. Like, if you need self-driving cars, they're going to need to have 3D in them. You have AR, which is coming up now, MR coming up. You have all these industries, and they all need 3D. So all these companies you never assume needed 3D artists are now suddenly looking for 3D artists, like Google, like Facebook. You have 3D artists at Facebook. It's weird, but it's because they're running all these projects which just requires 3D competence. So even if you're not thinking at things like traditional needs 3D artists like games and film, a lot of other ones are, like for instance medical illustration, maybe military contractors, everything Archface. Now with COVID as well, there's a lot of demand for Archface viewings of apartments, so they can do remote viewings instead of actually going there. They can build like VR studios of the house, and they can go in there. There's so many new avenues which didn't exist before, so I'm convinced that 3D is going to be a growing market.
Comics Legend is asking, are you still working in the 3D industry? Are you working full-time on FlippedNormals now?
Yeah, so both Morten and I are full-time on FlippedNormals, and we have been that for around 2.5 years by now. We're still working in the 3D industry in the sense that, FlippedNormals is still very much 3D focused, but we don't do commission work anymore, meaning we don't work on projects at all. That's very much deliberate right now. We are just dedicating all our effort to FlippedNormals.
Ishmael is asking, can you talk about the life in industry as a 3D artist?
We actually have a whole video on this you might enjoy. We go. It's not that I don't want to talk about it. It's just we have one which goes really in depth about it. It's called Life in a Day as a 3D Modeler, I think it is. It's from like 2 years ago. In short, at the bigger studios, you start work around 9 o'clock, which is definitely never postponed to 10 because you're a good person and you come at work when you're supposed to. It's always 9 o'clock, and then you might have some cereal from the kitchen. A lot of them have free cereal, milk, and coffee. You chat with your colleagues. They might have a cantina or some kind of cafe or something. So you go there and talk to your friends a little bit. Then you check your emails. You see what's going on. You see if anything is broken from the show the day before. Then you start to pick up you start to see if there was any feedback from yesterday. Maybe there was something from dailies yesterday, which might have been overseas. So see if there are any notes there. And then you start working, maybe after properly working after half an hour or so. Then you start working, and then you work for a few hours. Then it might be a daily session where your work is being reviewed. You have to prepare for that. Then you get feedback on your work, and then you address the feedback, and from there you do that. Then it might be maybe there is a meeting where you're talking about how to approach something. Early on in our projects, there are a lot of meetings, just like how do we do the thing? We have a lot of assets. How do we model them? What's the effective way of doing that? As you get more towards the end, there is less of that. There is also a lot of communication between departments. A lot of times it might be that as a modeler, the texture artists have a fix they need you to do. You're generally dealing with other departments a lot. It's a big part of your day.
Just want to say hello to Damien because he's listening right
now. Hey, Damien.
Yeah.
We actually just spoke about you, Damien, earlier. Well, almost.
We did?
Yeah. Well, almost. We spoke about when Damien joined NPC, there was another guy as well who joined from the gaming industry.
Is that Damien?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, that's Damien.
Yeah, Damien didn't join from the gaming industry,
okay.
But there was another guy as well who did that at the same time.
All right.
Hey, Damien.
Leonardo Ivan is asking, do you have some kind of mentorship for sculpting?
We do. We do have a mentorship for sculpting. You should try to Google FlippedNormals mentorship. You should be taken to a MailChimp page. Maybe you can even see if you can find it now. If you just try to Google this, it'll be there.
Yeah. Let's see.
And we can post it as a link there. Let's see, we are looking now. No, what if we just type mentor? So it's still, the mentorship is still very early on. There we go, this one. So it's still very early on. I'm not really taking on a lot of students. It's something that we might expand in the future. We had one student on already, well actually 2 students. We had one which was fully tracked through the mentorship, and it was incredible seeing how much she improved. She went from not really being able to sculpt a whole lot in the beginning to being a pretty damn proficient sculptor at the end after 2 months. It was really cool seeing it.
Bini Hidalgo 3D is asking, I have studied 3D modeling and 3D animation. Could I do both, or should I focus on only one?
Animation specifically is a tricky one, just because animation is so specialized. 3D modeling is something that you can learn in not that much time, particularly reference-based modeling. But animation is it's so focused on the fundamentals of acting and everything like that. So it's very hard to do both 3D modeling and animation. So unless you want to be a generalist at a smaller studio, I do recommend that you focus on one of them. One of them is not better than the other, but one thing you should note is that one isn't better than the other. One works a lot more with crunch. The reason is that if you're a modeler, you're going to be doing, like, your model can be used fundamentally like in every single shot. You do one model and it can be used in every single shot. But if you do animation, your animation really can't be reused. You can reuse it a little bit here and there, but essentially you're working with shots every single day, which means that there is just a lot more work there to be done. And since it's shot based, you're more at the end of the pipeline, which means it can be quite stressful for animators. I found that in VFX, some of the people who were pushed the hardest were animators and also compositors, and sometimes lighting artists as well, just because they are by definition more at the end of the show. In order to do animation, you need to have a lot of things done. You need to have modeling, or first concepting, modeling, rigging, layout. A lot of things will just have to be there before you can do it.
Okay. Small 3D modeler is asking, I am a 16-year-old boy, I have a question. Can I work in 3D modeling without having a high school diploma? Thanks.
Yes. You can 100% work in 3D modeling without a high school diploma. Like, nobody will care about it. I was reviewing some models at DNEG and some showreels at DNEG when I was there, and they don't care. The only way it might matter is because of if you can get a visa or not. But like, if you need a visa, but like, this is a field where it's kind of like carpentry, just that you don't need a carpentry exam, because if you do bad work, nobody's gonna die from that. So if you are if you want to drop out of high school, like, FlippedNormals' position is you should probably finish high school. That's generally a good thing. But just pure job wise, I worked with high school dropouts in VFX, and I worked with people who have PhDs, and they are to the same level, like in terms of like their skills. There's nothing which separates those people out.
Fritz is asking, what's the VFX and game dev scene in Denmark?
It's not super duper. It's indie games in Denmark seems to be doing better in the last few years, and there are some more higher end studios there as well. But it's like compared to particularly UK and also the US, like, Denmark is not the place for that, unfortunately. So I mean, essentially Sweden seems to be pretty decent. We're in Copenhagen now, and just across a little fjord here we have Malmö. And in Malmö there is a lot of AAA games, but Copenhagen itself and Scandinavia itself is not that great for this compared to like maybe Germany and France and England. UK particularly has a really strong creative industry, particularly for film. Like, if you try to compare essentially any other country in Europe to like London, like there is just no competition whatsoever, so to speak of.
Murad is asking, I enjoy making characters for VFX more than games, but I heard that there's more opportunity in games. Is that enough reason to switch?
I honestly have no idea. I genuinely don't know how much about that. I guess it makes sense there might be more opportunity in games, just because there are a lot more characters in games. There aren't that many characters in film, but I genuinely don't know. You have to ask somebody who works in games about that. Like I said before, I'm very reluctant to give advice on a topic I don't have more of a really solid understanding of.
Zapalninska, maybe? Do you think textures are often just distracting noise?
Yeah, textures. The thing is, when you're doing modeling and texturing, they should work with each other. You're not doing first texturing and then you're not doing first modeling and then you're doing texturing as a separate thing. They should enhance each other. Good modeling should be enhanced by good texturing. You don't just want to throw some crappy procedurals or smart material on it. Texturing is something you have to put just as much love into as you put into when it comes to the modeling.
Carty is asking, have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome or feeling like you're not up to the job?
Let me think. Yes. Has any artist in the world not dealt with imposter syndrome? I mean, imposter syndrome, for those who don't know, just means that you genuinely feel like an imposter. Like, not like, oh, I'm pretty good, but there are some better people here. But you're like, oh shit, they will find out that I'm not that good and they will throw me heads out of the building. And that happened all the time. I mean, when I was in VFX, like I really felt that. One of the reasons is because it's a hard job. Like, it genuinely is it's a hard thing to do. Like, even if you're super solid, some of the people I worked with, they were some of the best people I've ever met in terms of their field, but they were still having a really hard time a lot of the times with it, just because you're trying to push the boundaries of cinema or games. That's just inherently a hard thing to do. So you're sitting there and you don't really know what you're doing, even though you should. You feel like you should. And you see everyone around you doing great, even though they're also panicking about what they're doing. It's just hard. The way I deal with it is, particularly if you're in a big studio like that, is just trust that the studio was right, that they hired you. They're most likely not going to make a big hiring mistake. Just trust that they're doing a good job with you. But yeah, I mean, I honestly don't have a crazy good tip for how to deal with imposter syndrome, because I'm still dealing with that.
James Chan is asking, what's flashing here? Okay.
Something is flashing.
Something is flashing and distracting us. James Chan is asking, why does Technicolor own so many VFX studios? Is there an advantage for studios to be under the same conglomerate? That's a new word.
Yeah, conglomerate.
Okay.
The advantage of being under one big banner is that they can control the market more. It means if you're currently working at MPC and like 10 years ago, you're working at MPC and you want to leave MPC and you want to go to the mill, for instance. They're like, all right, cool, we can offer you a higher salary if you leave MPC and you join the mill. Now MPC and the mill is like, well, we're the same company, cool. So you can't really leave and just join the other company. It gives them a lot more advantages like that. They control the market a lot more, which, leads us to, is this ethical, or like, where's the legality of this in terms of, you have monopoly laws and all that. Technicolor is getting pretty big in terms of VFX, and they're taking over a lot of things right now. So there's the advantage of the studio is that the people who own the studio and the investors of the studio, they get a very nice paycheck. When I'm sure the founders of DNEG, who owned DNEG when they were acquired by Prime Focus, I'm sure they made a killing on that. But like, there isn't necessarily an advantage of DNEG to be under Prime Focus.
Leon Thomas is asking, does experience in 3D animation help with sculpting at all?
It can. If you have a good understanding of animation, you might have a great understanding of appeal, which again is a term which is hard to define, but it means that you might really understand how shapes work. Animation is a lot to do with poses, and which is again down to shapes. So if you are good at that, you might have an advantage in doing sculpting.
Dennis Petz is saying, hey Henning, any advice for recent graduates? Right now I have the feeling it's pretty hard to get a job, especially because people with far more experience are now searching for a job as well.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. Right now, I mean, now you didn't specify, I think, if you weren't trying to get film or games experience, but if it is in film, that right now this is just unfortunate, because the nature of film is you need film, you need actual plates, so they have to go out and they have to shoot the plates, and they can't. So no matter how much they want to continue working, they don't have anything to work with. And that's resulted in mass layoffs in nearly all the studios now. So there is a significant amount of unemployed VFX artists right now, and that's just the reality of it. Games, on the other hand, and maybe animation as well, is different, because there you don't inherently need stuff to be shot. It means you can, same with FlippedNormals as well, right? We don't need things to be done in the real world with real actors or something like that. You can work independently of what happens with a pandemic. You can, in theory, make a game 100% remote. We have voice talent remote, and you have directors and cinematography and everything remote. So without having numbers on this, it would make sense to me that games are doing okay right now, while film is not. I mean, I know film is not doing okay because you can't shoot anything right now. And also, if you're an investor as well in the film market, how would you invest in an animated movie, which you can work on now for next year, or would you invest in a live action movie, which there might be serious disruptions? Like you might not be able to enter or leave the country you're in. So, long story short, film, tricky right now. Tricky until this is fully back to the way it has been. Games, maybe better. Commercials, tricky one. Because the commercial budget is kind of the first thing companies drop if they're struggling for cash, which a lot of them are doing right now. Maybe some emerging technologies like AR and VR are doing okay because it's all more like tech companies. But yeah, it's hard to say.
I think there is still commercial work happening because there's a lot more CG-based commercial work. You can do a lot more commercials without a plate, though.
That's true. Yeah, you can do a fully, like all car commercials, all beer commercials.
Yeah, a lot of product placement commercials are. Yeah, but in that case, because I was laid off because of coronavirus as well right now, the one thing that I know, it's hard right now, but from the studio I was in from, and what they were saying is that even though it's hard now, they're thinking that it'll be a lot better whenever it comes back, because a lot of the projects are actually on standby. There's a lot of work that's just waiting to go, yes, we can film now. It's not like there isn't anything out there. So what they're hoping for is that first, it's when it comes back up, it's going to come back up strong. And that because of what's happening now, the studios will be more happy to do a lot of work in CG instead of keep saying that, we want to do it in plate, which gives more work for CG artists. So right now hard, but hopefully in the future better. Yeah,
I also think that this is more like prediction business for me, but I think there's going to be a fully decentralized VFX/game studio which is going to come out of this, because then you have such a clear advantage over this. Like if you can pull off being decentralized as like work from home studio, you just have a crazy advantage in how flexible you can be, and particularly if you're doing animation, feature animation like Pixar or Disney, because then you're essentially pandemic proof. Granted that your end result doesn't end up in a cinema, then you're kind of in the same.
Okay, Emil is asking, are you not worried photogrammetry will take a lot of work away from artists or make it more boring since it's mostly just cleanup?
Photogrammetry is an interesting one. Photogrammetry, for those of you who know, that photogrammetry is 3D scanning. I mean, right now you can take like an iPhone Pro and an iPad, and you can just go out and you can shoot a lot of cool things. Or if you have a decent camera, you can straight up like photo scan things. Take photos, and something like PhotoScan, the software PhotoScan, will give you a 3D model. And this is something we saw when it came to characters, particularly in film. I'm not sure about games, but where a lot of like all the actors, they were shot in a photo scanning session, meaning that we would just have scans of them, really high quality scans. So this is like a bigger picture question. Is photogrammetry going to take over 3D work? And essentially what's happening now is that reference-based work is in large part disappearing, because reference-based work isn't that hard to do. You need strong basics to do it, meaning you need to be able to operate the software to a high degree, but it's significantly easier than anything which has to do with design. So the way I've been thinking about this one a lot. If you want to succeed, like have long-term success in the creative industry, you need to do one of two things. You need to either get into the more creative side. That's a side where something like photogrammetry and more like AI tools is not going to take over directly. Is where like you need good taste and you're not just recreating something else. You're creating something truly original, like concept art. It's a painting, it's an emotion, it's a piece of music, it's a game by itself. It's something creative, something new. Or you can go into the more technical side of it, which is more making the tools for other people. Essentially making automation, like exacerbating automation, where you are now creating the tools artists are making. Or you can do a bit of a mix of that as well, where in bigger studios, stuff like character modeling is, at least for humans, is being taken over by a lot of outsourcing and a lot of wrap work. But stuff like in the middle, like smaller studios, which they're not just going to have a whole outsourcing department or a whole photogrammetry setup. They still need good old school reference-based modeling. And that's where you just have to be kind of in the middle, where you can do most things and be a good generalist. But I think essentially those are the two directions you have to go in, either more art direction-wise or more technical, or a solid mix of the two. It sounds a bit like a cop-out. Oh, it's one or the other, or it's in the middle. But like a problem is if you are purely a technical artist, in the sense that you can take a photo and you can, or a scan, and you can clean up the scan and you can retop it and all that. That means that somebody else can do that for much cheaper in a place like India. So you want to be very careful that what you're doing is not just processing data, but that you're creating something unique, like concept art, concept sculpting, creating something unique. I think that's really important.
Nathan is asking, what do they ask you during an interview, especially if you come from a different country?
I guess one thing they would kind of figure out is, like, kind of not necessarily by asking you, but just by the nature of it, is how are your communication skills? Like, what is your level of English? Like that's something if you come from a different country, which would be relevant. It would also be relevant. Do you need a visa for this? If so, that can also be problematic as well. Like, it's not that in 3D you need the best English skills at all, but you need to be able to communicate your ideas clearly and in an effective manner. But some general questions could be, what is your expected salary? What kind of experience do you have? What kind of here is a scenario where you need to take these shots through production. What would your approach be to this? Generally, stuff relating or pertaining to the job you're looking for. Also, be prepared to defend all the work you currently have in your portfolio. You should not have any old crap there, because they might ask about it and you're going to be like, it's like really like old stuff and I don't really know why it's there. But why is it there then?
Also remember to ask questions.
Yes.
Yes. Is it possible to achieve a steady income from selling modelings for games or 3D printing online, or should I find a normal day job?
Possible, yes. Hard, also yes. The reason why it's hard is because you have to figure out what models do people reliably need. If you're just selling like random models, there might not be a demand for that. Figure out what specifically what people want. Do that better than most people. Sell at affordable rates, and then go from there. But don't just spend like a year building a model pack and then try to sell it. Try to build a nice model and try to maybe give that away for free. See if there's a lot of interest in that. Build a mailing list for that, and then build another model, and now maybe you're charging for that. Essentially, you want to get data on what kind of work is selling, and then you go from there.
What type of work usually sells? Since you should know that.
Stuff which sells is stuff that people need over and over again, which could be base meshes, because people just need that. People require that. In our case, we see something like the FlippedNormals skin kits can do quite well, because it provides a real service to people. It can be kit bashing pieces, but you want to just be careful that you don't go too specialized in it. Think about what would a lot of people need.
Okay. Tyler James is asking, is it worth applying for big AAA studios at the beginning, or is it best to start small when you're looking for a job?
Yeah, I mean, apply for all the things. There isn't like what is the best way. It just depends. Some people get AAA jobs straight out of school. Some people spend 10 years getting that job because of personal reasons, or they don't feel like it, or that's when they were ready. There isn't like a better way of doing it. It just depends what you want to do. AAA isn't better than indie. It's just different.
If you do want to work in AAA though, I'd say apply. There's nothing to lose.
Yeah, no,
Worst
for sure.
case that you just don't get it.
Yeah, no, there is no problem there. They might also like ship you around the country or the world. I know, like if you go for Valve, they might just fly you to Seattle, which is
Oh no.
yeah.
Colin is asking, would you ever consider offering online courses such as those offered at CGMA?
Yes. In short, yes, yes, we would. Yes, I would love to offer proper like masterclass courses and similar things to CGMA.
Okay. You should take longer and answer more questions.
Sorry. I mean, if you don't have to have questions all the time. If you need a little break or something, you can just do that, and I can just sculpt.
Yeah, I'll go take a break. I need water.
Yeah. All right, so Elpida is leaving us for a little bit, and hopefully she will be back. I'll just be taking over for now. I probably won't be looking too much at the chat because it's very hard to do that at the same time as I'm sculpting. So I'm just going to be sculpting for a little bit now. The way I'm doing this now, I'm just looking at the reference and just trying to replicate some of the things. I'm seeing here, for instance, there's a nice fold here, so I'm trying to just get this fold in. Just trying to get some specificity. I've been doing a lot of very general stuff so far. So I just want to get some more specificity in. If you exit edit mode, you have to draw out the sculpt again. Yes, if you exit edit mode like this, you can switch it, and then you're like, oh no. Then you just enter edit mode again, and you hit Control N, and then you're back in business, my friend. All right, nice seeing you, Emil. We'll speak later on. Do you still work in industry, or are you full-time on FlippedNormals? Yeah, we're full-time on FlippedNormals. We don't do any contract work or anything. We are fully committed to FlippedNormals. Please, what is some mistakes in sculpting? Now, this is again where I want to just quickly talk about introduction to sculpting, because we cover a lot of that there. But a huge mistake we see in sculpting is that people forget mid-frequency. Mid-frequency is more like these little things. They're more like the subtleties between the shapes. They're more like the skin and all the mid-plane changes. You have like high freak, which is like low freak, which is like this kind of stuff, the big shapes. All of this stuff is low freak. Then you have higher frequency, which is like all the subtle little things, like the little pores and all that. But people forget about the middle, and that's a huge problem. One of the biggest beginner mistakes is not focusing on mid frequency. Another one as well is also just sculpting from camera. You sculpt from this angle instead of looking at the other angles, and there you are. You're just sculpting yourself into a corner. The Minotaur is so cute though. Well, thank you very much.
A lot of people are saying he's skipping leg day.
He is skipping leg day, isn't it? Let's see if we can beef that up. I also have to just work a bit more on legs because those are looking a little rough at the moment. Let's beef those little leggies up.
Sorry about that.
Pida.
I wonder how many people get PTSD there.
I was thinking that the Minotaur would have more of a barrel chest. Well, let's see if we can give him more of a barrel chest. What I did before as well, if you scroll back to the beginning of the stream, is that I sculpted a lot of this with the clay brushes, and then I just smoothed everything out like crazy, and that was to refine my shapes, just really making everything work. So just smooth out your things. I know we said in a lot of videos, don't use a smooth brush, but it can be a great way to simplify your sculpt down a lot. Do you miss working in the industry? Sometimes. It was really cool working in the field. There were a lot of really cool projects, and you work with some of the coolest people out there, and it's really fun working on like big things which you know is going to be seen by a lot of people. On the other hand, like there are pros and cons to having your own company like we're doing now. But you know, yeah, sometimes I do miss it. It's a lot of fun to work in the industry. I wouldn't go back if that's what you're asking, but is there anything wrong with the industry, or do you just decide that you want to be a boss for yourself? I just like there are definitely systematic problems in the industry. Like there's no doubt about that. But that was not why we left. We didn't go, oh, we've been here enough now. Let's or there were too many issues. Let's leave. We always want to do our own thing. Morten and I, we always want to build FlippedNormals. We were talking about that like from early days. How can we figure out a way to do that? We just really like to do our own things, regardless of industry. All industries have issues, some more than others. But it was really fun. I really enjoyed my time. What tutorials should I follow for learning sculpting in ZBrush? You should follow 2 specific ones which I recommend, and that is if you go here and then we go to FlippedNormals and then we go to our FN exclusives. And then we we have Introduction to ZBrush, we have the bundle, we have Intro to Sculpting. These 3 I recommend. Intro to ZBrush is exactly that. It's an introduction to it. It means you're going to learn everything about the software, and then at the end you're going to be learning how to sculpt this from scratch from all these stages. Very similar to what we're doing in this stream, just more structured. And then here is a whole bundle containing all sorts of things. And then we have Intro to Sculpting. This came out very recently, and here we go through real time how to sculpt this guy. I think it's over 5 hours long. And then we go through different skills throughout the series, like more stylized sculpting, focusing more on the different steps, and just really going through specifics of it. So if you're interested in improving your sculpting fast, I really do recommend Intro to Sculpting and Intro to ZBrush. I mean, I know I'm biased here because I made them and I spent a lot of time on them, but those are my genuine attempt at doing the best sculpting training possible, where there are still more things I want to do on it, but it is my actual attempt at taking everything I know of sculpting into some easy to use series. Recommendation for starting sculpting in Blender. That is a tricky one. Blender is changing really fast at sculpting. We did a tutorial about a year ago, which is now out of date because because tools change so much. I don't really have a whole lot of things there. I think every single tutorial on sculpting in Blender is out of date at the moment. Intro to Sculpting is going to still work because it's sculpting concepts, and those are the same for all software. But just technically how to do it, I don't have a whole lot. That's the problem with a tool like Blender, problem in quotation marks here, because it's great that you're getting all these updates. But if something keeps changing all the time, it's very hard to get proper documentation for it. Why does the bull have 2 arms and 2 legs? Well, he is a Minotaur. That's why.
Minotaurs have bull legs.
Not all of them. I found some reference before which had
which you're not using.
No, I found some reference before which had that. Let's see. I think I just found this one. This is a miniature sculpture, which is just straight up human with a head. I'm not sure how they're actually portrayed in classical. I was just making a snarly joke. I'm not Morten, I'm Henning, but thank you.
Who knows the difference?
Yeah, Henning and Morten are more ideas than specific people anyway at this point. Where can I learn more about composition? That's a tricky one. Do you know where would you know? Where would you learn composition, Alpida? Do you have any more resources?
Composition.
Yeah. Or is it compositing?
No, it's composition.
Composition. That's a tricky one. Master studies of old paintings, I would recommend. But yeah, it's tricky to find that, to find really good sources on that. You can find a lot of good photography books. Books and cinematography might really help you.
I mean, personally, I know that the Henrik tutorial you have for concepting.
Oh yeah.
That was talking about composition, and there's also a book that there is on FlippedNormals I can try to find.
Yeah.
That has some very nice composition stuff.
Wait, you're Morten? No, I'm Henning.
This is Henning, guys.
Yeah, I am Henning. I'm not Morten.
I am Morten.
Yeah, she is Morten. We are all Morten. I mean, to the hell with it. Today, yes, I am Morten. It's fine. I'm Morten today. Now this is an advantage of using a base mesh, because you can see what I'm struggling with now is not necessarily like it is also character designs, but it's also just getting good clean shapes. For instance, the hands look like he put his hand in like a sausage machine. It's not great. That's something you would get for free. Same with the feet as well, which were definitely through the sausage machine. You would just get that 100% for free if you use a base mesh, but I didn't, because I also wanted to explore more things. So pros and cons for it. This is still not a very refined sculpt. So, if I used a base mesh, I would have been here like 10 times faster. Earlier you said it was bad to not reference sculpts and to use your imagination, but later you said reference sculpting is being replaced by scans. reference for studies and progressing design skills to create original sculpts. Yeah, that's a tricky one. What I mean is, with the problems I've seen is that a lot of people who don't know anything about designs, they're trying to create their own sculpts. And it just doesn't work in most cases. So therefore, I'm recommending you to use existing concept art for it, because that is still a big part of your job as a concept sculptor or as a 3D artist. That is to adapt it. Yes, a lot of it is being taken over, but that's more the whole reference based. I mean, 100% reference based. I don't mean it's a piece of concept art which is being turned into a 3D piece. I mean, like, here's a bottle, model this exact bottle. For more creative things, which is concept based, I still really recommend using existing concept art for it. But it's a great question. Trying to catch me off guard, aren't you?
Justine has asked a question.
Oh, what is Justine's question? Yeah. What was it like? Interning in a big studio? And do you think companies will find something to replace the yearly internship while working from home? I think internships are practically impossible to replicate working from home. The problem is that you just need a person next to you to help you with things. So junior work in general is hard, but particularly interning, because that's even less experienced than juniors. I don't know how a studio can do interns remotely. Like it's just like the nature of it. Like it's like you just need people around you. Otherwise the intern experience is just like half of the intern experience is the social aspect of it, having different interns around you. So I don't know how that would work. My own intern experience was great. I was an intern at Framestore, which I believe Justine is currently at, which I asked the question. No, not an intern. Okay. But an artist. Yeah. So my experience was great. I was an intern at Framestore, which was really fun. I had a bunch of other interns with me, and we just had a bunch of fun for the entire summer. We lived right in Fitzrovia in London, which is very close to Soho, and it was a great experience. Obviously, nothing like that is happened this year, and we don't know about next year. I really hope they're back on the menu, because internships are fantastic, particularly the VFX ones. They're all paid. You get to work on cool projects. Like when I was at MPC, we had several interns who worked on really cool things. One of them worked on like straight up models for Alien Covenant, like really original cool things. That was Antoine, who just like kicked all sorts of ass. But you get to work on actually really cool things if you're fortunate enough.
I had a very good time as an intern, by the way. Yeah.
There's a lot of progress on machine learning for 3D, but there isn't any software coming out, and why? Yeah, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of theoretical things in machine learning, which is always being done, but there aren't really a lot of commercial things yet. What you have is you have some GAN software, which you can use for concepting and all that. One is Topaz Gigapixel, which uses AI to upres textures, which works with like magic, which is really cool. But yeah, it's still not fully there. I'm very interested to see what AI is going to do and machine learning is going to do to the 3D space once we can truly utilize those tools. Here's a question. How do you get reference to show like this? This is a tool called Pure Ref. Like pure, like something being pure, and ref as in reference. So P-U-R-E-R-E-F. So Pure Ref. Best thing ever invented.
Right on the chat.
If Damien is still watching, he was the one who introduced me to Pure Ref, well, at MPC, which was amazing. Yes, if you do use Purif, I recommend just paying a few dollars to the developers just because they can keep developing it. It's one of the most useful tools. Like I don't like the amount of value I get out of Puref is insane. It's one of these tools like if it wasn't a free tool, I would pay a lot of money to have it. It essentially means that I don't need a second monitor to work anymore. I used to need one, but now I just don't anymore. I would have like a Photoshop board open with all my reference, but right now I don't really have to have that. Do you think that with software getting better, there will be a point where you don't need UVs anymore? Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? Like UVs isn't just like a necessary evil. It's also a very useful tool in production. Like UVs aren't just being used for textures. They're also being used as utilities as well. Like if you're doing grooming, you'll use UVs. If you are doing any kind of look dev, you'll be using that because you need to create utility maps. No matter what it is, you'll be using UVs a lot. So I don't think UVs are going to be disappearing. Even if you have stuff like PTEX, I really don't like that in terms of texturing in something like Mari. It's much better to texture with UVs because you control it a lot more. But what I think is going to happen is that the UV tools are going to get significantly better. Like the tools you have, for instance, in Maya today compared with what you had like 10 years ago just makes UVing like makes it just like a joke how much easier it is. You select some scenes, you unfold, you optimize it, you use the automatic layout feature, and you're pretty good to go in most cases. How excited is everyone for Unreal Engine 5? Yeah, very. That should be super cool. Probably will take some time before studios start using it, I guess, because you really don't want to bet on version 1 of that, even though it might be good. Got to be careful with switching tool midway through. Every game which is in production today would not be switching, and yeah, I wouldn't be the first ones out to switch to try it out, but maybe they were already beta testing it. How do you know when you master anatomy? Well, if you think you've mastered anatomy, you haven't mastered anatomy. Maybe you know you master anatomy if you teach it a lot and you've been teaching it for a very long time with high success rates, and now you're getting obsessed about the tiniest plane changes and you know a lot of the names and you really start to get obsessed with the smallest little things. But I don't believe there is such a thing as mastering anatomy. I think there is such a thing as getting really, really good at it. Because the more you learn about anatomy, the more you realize you don't know anatomy. Because the moment you think you have a good grasp of it, then you're like, oh crap, there's more stuff than just muscles. There is fascia, there is fat, there is skin. And now you start to be obsessed with skin quality for different ethnicities and different genders and different ages. So there's no such thing where you're just like, yeah, I'm good now at that. It's just like an ever-evolving thing. Mastering anatomy is not understanding the origin and insertion and simply memorizing their names. It becomes more fundamental, and it becomes more about who the person is and their history and how skin compresses and all of these. Yeah, anatomy is just an endless journey. Can't win. Yeah, no, I mean it is. You're at no point are you like, yeah, I'm done now. The moment you think you are done with anatomy, that is the point where you are standing at a very high peak and you think you're at the highest peak, and then the fog clears and you're just seeing the other mountains around you and they are 10 times higher. Guys, can you confirm that this is the Minotaur from Hades, or just a random Minotaur? Definitely a Minotaur. And I definitely played a lot of Hades. Let's see. I'm just making a general Minotaur for now, but I would love to turn him more into Asterios from Hades. At least based on that, because I just think he's the coolest dude. I should just start to do a design pass on him to make him more like him. Peter is asking, any plans of coming back to teach at Tau again? I just got in this year and I'm hoping you guys will be around. Yeah, that would be great. We don't know though if that's possible. First off, like this year, I was actually asked to come back and teach this year at the animation workshop in Denmark. But doing it remotely or like semi on site was just not an option. Like that sounded really rough for me, so I didn't want to do that. But also we just have to see as well. When it comes to FlippedNormals as well, it's hard to prioritize going on site to teach for 2 weeks. But it would be a lot of fun. Let's see what the future brings. No promises either way.
How long is your Hades playtime?
Oof, we don't talk about my Hades playtime. I have 103 runs, I think.
No, you have more. You have at least 120.
Oh, I have 120 runs, and that's only on the Switch, and I probably have 40 or so on PC. So yeah, let's say it's 100 and it's like 50.
I think it's more.
Yeah, my Hades. We don't talk about my Hades playtime in this house.
No.
What's your game of the year? Well, that is Hades. Why are you sculpting without perspective? I'm not. I'm very much sculpting with perspective as of 5 seconds ago. Yeah, I was turning it off because sometimes it's easier to select things. Like if you want to go to the side view now and you want to select something now, it's a lot easier to select something. And then I forgot to turn it on again. If you want to select like the horn up here, it's a lot easier when it's off. But yeah, you should probably work with perspective on. I would love to hear if anyone has any cool like Black Friday deals for games. Are there any cool Switch games which are out for free now or cheap? Because I would love to pick something up, something you can play over Christmas or something like that. Will there be any chance of you reviewing more portfolios? Maybe later this week. We haven't determined any of that yet. Let's see. If we do review portfolios, we will always review them, like take a pre-look, we'll take a quick gander at them before we do any kind of reviews during the videos, just because we have to just have a think about it, and yeah, we just have to prepare a little for those. Just gonna save. I love you, Henning. Well, I love you too, Ian. Cyberpunk incoming. That should be interesting. Maybe. I have 12 items in my cart from FlippedNormals. Wow, that's really impressive. What are you picking up? Why is it better to use perspective? That is a great question. So if you're looking at the model now without perspective, it looks very different from now with perspective. It's not crazy different because he's just a character with like 2 legs. But imagine if he was like a lot longer, it was like a lion or something, which was a lot further down the z-axis. Then if you turn on and off perspective, the character looks completely different. So now if you're reviewing him like this, look at his neck right now. His neck looks really thick, and now it looks a lot slimmer. So if you're reviewing it without perspective on, you're not reviewing the final thing, which means if you take your model into shot, like for my case, it doesn't matter a whole lot because I'm not, but as a general rule, if you take your model into shot, now you are in trouble, young man, because your model doesn't match anymore, and it's your fault. But yeah, perspective and isometric view, orthographic view can be great as well. They're just different tools. Use them wisely. Will your stream be available as a video? Yes, it will. I will make this available right afterwards. What have you been doing to keep active and healthy during the quarantine? Yeah, what have we been doing to keep active during the quarantine? I try to take a walk every single morning. There is a little outdoor gym next to where we live as well, so I try to do pull-ups and such there. But yeah, hopefully I can do more real active things. Is there an age limit to get into the industry? That is a question we've actually heard a lot. And every time I've been answering the same thing, like there really isn't like an age limit. As long as you're able to come with fresh ideas and you can do the work, that should be fine. The funny thing is, most of the time when this question is asked, it's by people who's like 21 and it's like, I just turned 20. Is it too late for me to join the industry? And that's like, if that's the case, absolutely not. It's too late. You're just getting started. But even I worked with people who were fairly fresh in the industry and they were in their 40s, some early 50s. Like just, if you want to do this job, then just do it. I read a thread, I think, it was on Reddit some years ago, which kind of changed my mind on it. There was, we talked about this in some of the videos. It was a guy who wanted to become an engineer, and he was like 38 years old, and he was asking his friend that, well, should I do it? He's like, I'll be 42 by the time I'm done. And his friend was like, you'll be 42 anyway. You might as well be an engineer. And it's the same thing here. You know, you're going to be, if you're 30 now and you're going to be 32 by the time you finish your degree, well, you're going to be 32 anyway. You might as well be a game artist. Thanks for the comment, Ryan. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. Good, and congrats on getting the job. Yeah, I know you guys, Lazar is saying, I know you guys are saying that we shouldn't do our own concept, but it's just that it kills the art part for me. And I'm so much happier when I do my own concepts. Well, you know, then do your own concepts. Like, we're not saying that you shouldn't do your own concepts. We're saying that your chances of getting the job will increase if you use existing concept art. But if you really enjoy doing your own concepts and you're getting good at that, then by all means, do your own concepts. I mean, there is a reason why there are concept artists out there. There are a lot of people who are legit amazing at making concepts. So, you know, if you enjoy doing that, keep it up. Just do that. Also, if you are doing stuff for your portfolio and you really want to get a job and you're not that strong in concepts, you know, do use an existing concept art for your portfolio, and then for your personal work, make your own things. That's 100% okay. It's not it's not a rule. Like nobody's gonna come after you for it. It's more just it's a piece of general good advice which applies to most people. Do you guys have a Discord? Yes, we do. If you go to FlippedNormals.com and then in the top menu, let's see if we can go to FlippedNormals.com. In the top menu, there is a Discord right here. If you click on that, you can go to Discord. And just a quick reminder as well that we have indeed a Black Friday sale going on now. Just go to the website. And here we have a lot of really cool things going on, like introduction to ZBrush, intro to Maya, a lot of really cool tutorials, Retopo, intro to Designer, Blender courses, a bunch of different things. I think we just hit 5,000 products on the store, so I'm really proud of that. What was the hands down the worst thing you've ever sculpted? Not in terms of how it turned out, just getting there and working on it. What was that thing that just is the absolute worst thing to work on? Oh, that's a tricky one. I'm trying to think, what's the worst thing? Probably, it's hard, right? Because the worst thing I worked on was something that I would just scrap. I did a model this week, which I'm not sure if it was objectively a bad model, but I just hated doing it. And I felt like crap. And that's often how it works, where it's not that you can have something which right now, I absolutely hate in terms of my sculpts, and I wouldn't show to anyone. But 10 years ago, I would have loved to be able to sculpt like that. What you define as good and bad just changes with time, and it's very hard to have like an objective measure for what's a good or a bad sculpt for yourself, because it's all based on your own experience. In terms of professional experience, like we didn't really work on a lot of like bad sculpts because it was full on VFX quality. A lot of time was spent making sure that everything was done properly, like technical sculpting wise, and everything was just done up to a certain standard. What base mesh do you recommend from the marketplace? Well, there are plenty of good ones, but one I really recommend is if we type Vincent. I'm again typing with one hand. I apologize for that because my hand is behind this. The keyboard is behind the screen. But if you go to Marketplace and we look at Vincent Mini here, he's a friend of ours. Really good artist. Currently working on Riot Games, and he has some really cool base meshes. They're fundamentally the same, just like male and female and high and low poly. This one is great. This is a whole bundle, and it has UVs. It can be used for VFX and can be used for games. Just a very, very solid one. I use this a lot for my own projects, and it just saves me a lot of time. Like if I was doing this for any kind of production, I would have, like this bull, I would have 100% used one of his space meshes, because I'm not going to start from a sphere if I'm on any kind of time sensitive deadline.
And right now it's 50% off. Woo!
Right now, 50% off. Get Vincent stuff. Support that nice man. Fritz is asking, Henning, since you and Morten are working from home, what chairs are you using? Currently we're using Herman Miller's Aeron chairs. They're pretty damn pricey, but what's cool about those kind of chairs is that a lot of companies, they get a lot of money in funding, so they buy all the nice chairs, and then they go out of business a year later, and now they have to sell those chairs. So we got these chairs at half the price. There were a lot of used ones there. There's no reason at all to buy one of those chairs for full price, because they're like legit like $1,500 is bonkers. But I really recommend like a good proper chair. I know the Herman Miller ones aren't for everyone, like not like excluding price, just in terms of pure how they feel to use, but I really enjoy them, and they've saved my back so many times. Which license and version of ZBrush do you recommend for a beginner? Well, you can check out the Core, ZBrush Core. I think it's called Core Lite or something like that, which is the free version of it, which it's very limiting what you can do, but it's enough to get you started with sculpting. It has has some nice features there. And then once you feel more comfortable with that, you can upgrade to core. And then there's probably going to be some kind of promotional offer to upgrade from core to the full version once you're ready. But keep in mind that your sculpting skills are not going to improve if you go from those versions. Just you get more technical features, which might be needed if you do more professional work or portfolio pieces. Core Mini, that's the one, not Core Lite. Oh, Henning, you know nothing about ZBrush versions. Now what I'm doing as well when it comes to the sculpt is I'm going over with a lower intensity brush and I'm just refining it. Instead of smoothing stuff out, I'm just going over and refining all the shapes. Just really trying to make them nice. What part do you hate or dislike doing the most doing 3D? Ooh, that's a hard one. Waiting for renders is pretty terrible. I enjoy most parts of the production actually. Like if it comes to UV mapping, which I know a lot of people dislike, I strangely enjoy UV mapping because it feels like doing a puzzle. What I don't enjoy is very repetitive things. We have to do the same thing over and over and over again. I like some variety. Like if you work on one character for like 6 months, that becomes hard. Cleanup of scans and such is pretty boring. Photogrammetry cleanup is not great. But I actually enjoy most parts of 3D. Do you like retopo? Yeah, I kind of enjoy retopo sometimes. Like again, it also feels like a puzzle. It also depends, right? You know, if you just want to sculpt, like I have projects where I just cannot be bothered with retopology at all. I just want to focus on the sculpting, and then what I do, I take like a Vincent base mesh or something, and I just wrap it to whatever I have here. Like you have something called, let's see if we can Google it, wrap.
It's Wrap 3D.
Wrap 3D. Let's see if we can find it on my keyboard where I'm typing behind it. This one, Wrap Russian 3D scanner. This is phenomenal. They have something called ZWrap as well. The cool thing about ZWrap, or ZWrap if you prefer, is that you can have it directly in ZBrush. You take a base mesh, you take your scan or your model, and you simply just wrap it to it. This is like a revolutionary product. Let me just see if this video plays. So here you have a scan, you have a base mesh, and then you just click on some points and it just conforms it to it. This is where I cannot be bothered to retopo. Like I wouldn't retopo a default head. There's no point at all in retoping a default head unless you want to practice, because it's already been done. It's already been done faster and probably better than you can do, at least right away. Would it be better for learning to create hair with fiber mesh, or should I use another program for it? Fiber mesh for me is pretty terrible. I really don't enjoy using fiber mesh. The best tool, which I know I'm gonna get hate for saying this because it's a controversial program, but XGen is probably the most solid solution which most people have access to. That's just X and Gen for Maya. It does the trick. Is sculpting in Blender worth mastering, or is ZBrush better? Do you recommend using the model made in ZBrush for Unity? So I don't know about Unity. I'm not gonna attempt those ones. In terms of ZBrush versus Blender for sculpting, the concepts are the same. Like if you understand the concepts of sculpting, there's not gonna be a whole lot of big difference between ZBrush and Blender. The only difference will be the actual tools. ZBrush is without a doubt the superior sculpting tool. Blender is getting better, but it's nowhere near where ZBrush is in terms of modeling. All right, we have been sculpting for a long time now. I am going to save this guy. And then I'm going to just close this down, and we're going to end this pretty soon. I'm just going to take you through some of the history here. So this is around almost like 6,500 steps now. So I just want to take you through it. Any plans to make an intermediate guide to Maya? The beginner series was great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It depends what you want from that. What do you want from an intermediate series in Maya? What would you say are the things in Introduction to ZBrush or Introduction to Sculpting that would help you the most? I would say probably an intro to sculpting, understanding appeal and gesture, and just getting into the mindset of how to work with that in a practical sense. It's very hard to do, but I think that it's a very hard thing to explain. But I think that helps a lot of people if you can understand those concepts. What is a good way to understand shapes for sculpting at a good pace? So sculpting shapes are... Understanding shapes is a combination of simply understanding shapes in a more abstract sense, like what makes an appealing shape, and also understanding the underlying shapes for it, understanding the underlying anatomy going on. So if you understand the anatomy which is going on, then it becomes so much easier to make good shapes. Then you're not guessing, then there is a general framework for it. I did the intro to sculpting course, totally recommend it. Well, thank you, Severus. I really appreciate that. Why is Xgen considered controversial? Xgen is controversial because it's kind of a piece of crap. It can produce great results, but it's so buggy. It's so picky with everything. You have to set the project. If you don't do everything correctly, you're just in a lot of trouble. So it's hard. In theory, it's an easy tool to use. You have to just understand a few basics. We have a free video on that on YouTube. Just search for Xgen and FlippedNormals. But what's hard about it are all the quirks. The problem is you never know if you screwed something up or if Xgen itself is just buggy. All right, so let's take you through the history. 6,000, almost 7,000 undos. So we're starting off with just a sphere, just for the head. And then we're just taking you through it, and we are just blocking out a body, blocking out some arms, starting with the bony landmarks, and just generally trying to get some definition in areas, or getting some polygons there. Then we're just refining it, getting in more bony landmarks, getting in just some facial features, and I'm just trying to get coverage of all the areas now. I'm not trying to do anything fancy, simply getting coverage in all of them. Getting some anatomy in there and just focusing on shapes. I want to get the feeling of the character across without getting too deep into it. You don't want to go too deep into anatomy early on. You want to get the character across, and I want to get this strong, fierce bull. And then it's essentially refinement and refinement and refinement for like 2 hours. Where at the end of it, you can't really tell a whole lot of difference, but you know, it's getting there. Then we're just looking into different areas, and we're just going in and just refining it and just making it nice. How often do you sculpt, and do you become rusty after not sculpting for a while? Yes, you become quite rusty. I sculpt semi-regularly now, not as often as I used to when I did it as a job, but I do sculpt to keep myself up to date on, first, you know, keeping up to date on tools, but also on techniques as well, and trying out different techniques, which is important. You do become rusty, but if you have solid enough fundamentals, then it's not like a memory game. Then it becomes more of understanding the concepts, and you keep doing that. Some good practices, if you want to practice, is simply just sculpt a lot and use reference when sculpting so that you have something to compare it against. Then you get feedback on that as well. Any plans for FlippedNormals course, like the intro to sculpting for like principles of texturing? I was actually just talking to Morten about that the other day, about how I would love to make an intro to texturing where we cover a lot of different concepts, like what are node-based approaches, what is Mari, what is Painter, and just how to approach it. What are different maps? What is PBR? I would really love to create that one. I think that would be a lot of fun to do. But no promises on that, like at all. And that's just an idea at this moment. The next one I'm currently working on is Introduction to Blender for Advanced Artists, which is for people who know 3D and they want to learn Blender, but they have no interest in looking through the beginner tutorials for Blender. Like, what is a polygon? What is navigation? They just want to get into it. All right, so we're shutting off now pretty soon. It's almost like midnight here, so we've been doing this for a while. So just like we can take maybe one more question. Before that as well, just remember that all things in the FlippedNormals store and the FlippedNormals marketplace are currently 50% off. So bunch of cool things like bins and space meshes. We have intro to sculpting. We have intro to ZBrush. We have a lot of really cool training, which we have spent a lot of time on to make sure is properly refined. Okay, so last question now. Let's do this from VEC or VEC. When you sculpt for concept, you don't need UVs, or do you? But when you sculpt a character for animation in ZBrush, what is the point of sculpting? At what point of sculpting do you do retopology and UVs? Okay, so two questions. Why do you need UVs for concept sculpting, and when do you retopo? So first off, you don't need UVs for concept sculpts at all, like, because then you're trying to find out ideas, and you don't have to have UVs to explore ideas. UVs is more if you want to use it more as a production asset. So you can poly paint without UVs, and you can bring that into something like Blender or Maya, and you can sculpt it there. You can even use auto UVs features for that if you really have to. When do you retopologize? You retopologize when your character is at a better point. Currently, this guy here is nowhere near ready for retopology. He's missing so many things, mostly design features. Like, we have to go in and refine this guy a lot, just making sure he's more refined. Then we go in and we retopo him, and then at the end of it, we can reproject what we have, and getting to a point where we will only add like mid-frequency and fine frequency. No new things will be added. If we're not sure about the back of him here, we're not going to retopo him. If we're not, like his hands, we can't retopo this, because look at his hands, they're like little sausages. So we can't have that. So that is when you retopo. You retopo when your design is finished, and when your model is to a refined stage. So thank you so much for watching, guys. This was a lot of fun. We'll probably do more streaming this entire week, where I just want to take this guy almost like to the finished level. That'd be a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying this. It's a lot of fun doing Q&A as well. So yeah, this has been awesome. Again, just a reminder to check out the sale. This is going now for... This is now going for, started this morning and is currently very much going. So 50% off everything. And thank you so much for watching, everyone.